every state and communities across the country and around the globe. They are FBI, DEA, ATF agents, and United States Marshals who risk their lives to serve their communities. They are prosecutors and staff who work tirelessly to enforce our laws. The overwhelming majority are career public servants, meaning that they were not appointed by the president of any party. Second, I want to provide clarity about what the job of the Justice Department is and about what it is not. Our job is to help keep our country safe. That includes working closely with local police departments and communities across the country to combat violent crime. In fact, today, we are announcing the results of a recent U.S. Marshals operation conducted with state and local law enforcement. That operation targeted violent fugitives and resulted in 4,400 arrests across 20 cities in just 3 months. Our work also includes combating the drug cartels that are poisoning Americans. Last Friday, we extradited Ovidio Guzman Lopez, a leader of the Sinaloa cartel, from Mexico to the United States. He is a son of El Chapo and one of more than a dozen cartel members we have indicted and extradited to the United States. Our job includes seeking justice for the survivors of child exploitation, human smuggling, and sex trafficking. And it includes protecting democratic institutions like this one by holding accountable all those criminally responsible for the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Our job is also to protect civil rights. That includes protecting our freedoms as Americans to worship and think as we please, and to peacefully express our opinions, our beliefs, and our ideas. It includes protecting the right of every eligible citizen to vote and to have that vote counted. It includes combating discrimination, defending reproductive rights under law, and deterring and prosecuting attacks such as hate crimes. And our job is to uphold the rule of law. That means we apply the same laws to everyone. There is not one set of laws for the powerful and another for the powerless, one for the rich and another for the poor, one for Democrats and another for Republicans, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity or religion. Our job is to pursue justice without fear or favor. Our job is not to do what is politically convenient. Our job is not to take orders from the president, from Congress, or from anyone else about who or what to criminally investigate. As the president himself has said, and I reaffirm today, I am not the president's lawyer. I will add, I am not Congress's prosecutor. The Justice Department works for the American people. Our job is to follow the facts and the law, and that is what we do. All of us recognize that with this work comes public scrutiny, criticism, and legitimate oversight. These are appropriate and important given the matters and the gravity of the matters that are before the department. But singling out individual career public servants who are just doing their jobs is dangerous, particularly at a time of increased threats to the safety of public servants and their families. We will not be intimidated. We will do our jobs free from outside influence, and we will not back down from defending our democracy. Third, I want to explain why we approach our job in this way. The Justice Department was founded in the wake of the Civil War and in the midst of Reconstruction with the first principal task of bringing to justice white supremacists and others who terrorize Black Americans to prevent them from exercising their civil rights. The Justice Department's job then and now is to fulfill the promise that it is at the foundation of our democracy, that the law will treat each of us alike. That promise is also why I am here. My family fled religious persecution in Eastern Europe at the start of the 20th century. My grandmother, who was one of 5 children. Born in what is now Belarus, made it to the United States, as did 2 of her siblings. The other 2 did not. Those 2 were killed in the Holocaust. And there is little doubt that but for America, the same thing would have happened to my grandmother. But this country took her in, and under the protection of our laws, she was able to live without fear of persecution. That protection is what distinguishes this country from so many others. The protection of law, the rule of law, is the foundation of our system of government. Repaying this country for the debt my family owes, for our very lives, has been the focus of my entire professional career. That is why I served in the Justice Department under 5 different attorneys general under both Democratic and Republican administrations. That is why I spent more than 25 years ensuring the rule of law as a judge, and that is why I left a lifetime appointment as a judge and came back to the Justice Department 2.5 years ago. And that is why I'm here today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. And you were right. America is the greatest country ever, and we on this side, I know, are very concerned about the equal application of the law that you talked about in your opening statement. With that, we'll move to 5-minute questions, and we will start with the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss, the rule of law does distinguish our country, but you have not upheld that. You have allowed the rule of law to erode, and that's why 65% of the people in this country have no faith in the Department of Justice under your leadership. They don't trust it. They don't trust you. The reason is because they're witnessing every day a politicized Justice Department in a 2-tiered system of justice. For example, they see the DOJ, of course, aggressively prosecuting President Biden's chief political rival, Mr. Trump, while at the same time, they see slow walking and special treatment given to the president's son. That's just a fact that everybody can see with their own 2 eyes. I want to focus on that investigation of the Biden family. We have many important questions for you today about that. Let me just get right to the chase. Has anyone from the White House provided direction at any time to you personally or to any senior officials at the DOJ regarding how the Hunter Biden investigation was to be carried out?
No.
Have you had personal contact with anyone at FBI headquarters about the Hunter Biden investigation?
I don't recollect the answer to that question, but the FBI works for the Justice Department. It's
I'm sorry. You don't recollect whether you've talked with anybody at FBI headquarters about an investigation of the president's son?
I don't believe that I did. I promised the Senate when I came before it for confirmation that I would leave Mr. Weiss in place and that I would not interfere with his investigation.
Okay,
I have kept that promise.
All right. Have you had personal contact with anybody at the Baltimore field office on the Hunter Biden matter?
No.
On July 10th, 2023, U.S. Attorney David Weiss told Senator Lindsey Graham, quote, I had discussions with departmental officials regarding potential appointment under 28 U.S.C. Section 515, which would have allowed me to file charges in a district outside my own without the partnership of the local U.S. attorney, end quote. With whom did Mr. Weiss have those discussions?
I'm not going to get into the internal deliberations of the department.
But you must, sir. This is important for us. We have oversight responsibility over your department, and we need these answers.
As appropriate, necessary for Mr. Weiss to have conversations with the department. I made clear that if he wanted to bring a case in any jurisdiction, he would be able to do that. The way you do that is to get an order signed by the Attorney General called a 515 order. I promised he would be able to do that, and he in his letters made clear he understood he would be able to do that.
Okay, can you tell us about any briefings or discussions that you personally have had with Mr. Weiss regarding any and all federal investigations of Hunter Biden?
I'm going to say again, I promised the Senate that I would not interfere with Mr. Weiss.
So you have not, I'm just, under oath today, your testimony is, you have not had any discussions with Mr. Weiss about this matter?
Under oath, my testimony today is that I promised the Senate I would not intrude in his investigation. I do not intend to discuss internal Justice Department deliberations, whether or not I had them.
Oh, okay. So your testimony today is you're not going to tell us whether you've had discussions with Mr. Weiss.
My testimony today is I told the committee that I would not interfere. I made clear that Mr. Weiss would have the authority to bring cases that he thought were appropriate.
Okay.
Mr. Weiss's
All right.
letter.
Okay, let me stop you.
makes
For sake of
clear-
time, sir, are you aware that FBI officials have come before this committee and they have stated that there was a cumbersome bureaucratic process that Mr. Weiss had to go through to bring charges in another judicial district? You know that?
I'm not aware, but that's not true. There's nothing cumbersome about the process.
So those
All I
whistleblowers
need
are
to-
lying to us under oath? Those whistleblowers are lying?
I
Is
didn't
your
say
testimony?
that. Their description of the process is cumbersome is an opinion. It's not a fact question. All I have to do is
Okay,
sign a
all
section.
right, let me get to the fact. Mr. Weiss has been the lead prosecutor on the Hunter Biden case since 2018, correct?
I'm sorry?
Mr. Weiss has been the lead prosecutor on the Hunter Biden case since 2018. Now, here's the question.
He's been the lead prosecutor since he was appointed by President Trump.
Okay,
And
why,
assigned-
let me ask you, why has the Justice Department dragged this investigation out for so long? Does it really take years to determine if Hunter Biden lied on a federal form related to purchasing a firearm?
Mr. Weiss was a long-time career prosecutor. President Trump appointed him as the
You're not answering the question. Is that standard procedure? Should it take that long to make such a simple determination?
I'm answering the question. Give me an opportunity to do so.
Okay?
He was charged with that investigation under the previous administration. He's continued. He knows how to conduct investigations, and I have not intruded or attempted to evaluate that because that was the promise I made to the Senate.
The whistleblowers gave us testimony about serious misconduct at the Justice Department in regards to the preferential treatment afforded Hunter Biden. Has your office requested an investigation into that?
There are well-known processes for how whistleblowers make their claims. I am a strong proponent of whistleblowers and a strong defender. We have an Inspector General's office. We have an Office of Professional Responsibility. That is the way in which complaints from whistleblowers should be and are appropriately handled.
I'm out of time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Nadler. Okay, Dan.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for being here today. It's no secret that some of my colleagues across the aisle have threatened to shut down the government unless and until the FBI and the Department of Justice are defunded. One Trump-light presidential candidate has said that we should abolish the FBI altogether. Mr. Attorney General, what would be the impact on America of defunding the FBI?
Defunding the FBI would leave the United States naked to the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party, to the attacks by Iranians on American citizens and attempts to assassinate former officials, to the Russian aggression, to North Korean cyber attacks, to violent crime in the United States, which the FBI helps to fight against, to all kinds of espionage, to domestic violent extremists who have attacked our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, and who have killed individuals out of racial hatred. I cannot imagine the consequences of defunding the FBI, but they would be catastrophic.
Thank you. I want to turn to Mr. Weiss's investigation and the authority he's been granted to conduct that investigation without interference in whatever way he deems necessary. You testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee on March 1st of this year that David Weiss had, quote, full authority over any investigation concerning Hunter Biden. Was that a true statement at the time?
Yes, Mr. Weiss has full authority to conduct his investigation however he wishes, and Mr. Weiss has confirmed that in letters to this committee.
Thank you. This authority included ensuring that Weiss would be able to bring charges in jurisdiction outside of Delaware if necessary. Is that correct?
I assured Mr. Weiss publicly that he would have the authority to bring a case outside of Delaware if he thought that was appropriate.
Does that remain true today?
Yes, that is true today.
Has it ever been the case over the course of this investigation that Mr. Weiss would not have been able to bring charges outside of Delaware if warranted?
As a matter of my authority, I promised he would be able to do that. I think as is apparent in the letters exchanged with the committee and in my previous testimony, in order for a United States attorney or a special counsel or anyone else to bring a case outside of his jurisdiction, it requires me to sign a paper called Section 515. That's the statute which permits bringing cases outside of the jurisdiction. I promised that I would do whatever was required to enable Mr. Weiss to bring a case outside his jurisdiction if that's what he thought was appropriate.
And I assume it was your understanding that Mr. Weiss was fully aware that he could bring charges outside of Delaware if necessary when you testified on March 1st.
Mr. Weiss has said so in the letters he sent to this committee.
Thank you. Did he ever say or do anything that might make him unsure of where he could bring charges?
Mr. Weiss's own letters reflect that he had never asked me to be special counsel and that he understood the process for asking for a signature on a Section 515 form.
There have been accusations that the handling of the Hunter Biden matter is an example of a two-tiered system of justice. What's your response to that allegation?
The Justice Department treats everyone alike, regardless of party, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of wealth. Everyone is treated alike. I understand that people may not understand why particular investigations are conducted in particular ways until all the facts come out. That's what we have a court for, and all of the explanations will come out with respect to Mr. Weiss, for example, at the end of his period as special counsel. One of the requirements is that he file a report, which I have promised to make public to the extent that's lawful and consistent with department policy. He will explain his decisions to prosecute and not to prosecute.
Thank you. What are the impacts of members of Congress making such accusations against the DOJ? Do baseless accusations from government officials make it more difficult for investigators to do their job and effectively investigate the subject?
Members of the Justice Department are strong and tough and able to understand that their job is to do the right thing regardless of any pressures from any quarter. What is dangerous, and I'm not talking about the committee, but what is dangerous is when anyone singles out a career prosecutor or a career FBI agent, and we know as a matter of fact that that kind of singling out has led to threats. This is a concern across the board. It is not a concern about anyone in particular.
I think you would have been justified in referring to the committee. My time has expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Attorney General, you're the only person who could ensure that Mr. Weiss had all the necessary authority, aren't you?
I'm the only person who can sign an agreement with respect to special counsel. The authority to do Section 515 can be signed by other people in the department.
You're aware, ultimately, though, the authority is yours.
Yes.
You made the point that you don't take orders from the president about such things. You decide, ultimately, what the Justice Department will do.
I announced at the beginning, I promised that he would be able to bring whatever cases he wants, and I have followed through on that promise. I'm permitted to make that kind of promise, and I have made it.
Did you undertake to inform yourself, to interact with him sufficient to ensure that he knew he possessed that authority, or that you would see to it that he had all necessary authority?
I don't think there's any doubt that he knew. He has written 3 letters to this committee indicating that he understood he had that authority.
You're also aware, though, aren't you, sir, that a senior IRS investigator, whistleblower, came forward and has testified publicly that Mr. Weiss stated that he did not have such authority. He was not the decider. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of the testimony. I was not present at any point during that statement. And Mr. Weiss, who was present, has indicated that he had the authority and he knew that he had it.
Subsequent to those developments, though, you decided to make Mr. Weiss special counsel, which you had not done before.
Mr. Weiss made clear he did not ask me to be special counsel until last month, and last month I made him special counsel.
Did you have some lack of information that you should have had that would have caused you to act earlier to make him special counsel?
Mr. Weiss did not ask to be special counsel before.
I understand he didn't ask. You've said that, sir. Did you take the necessary steps to inform yourself what authority he understood he had or what obstacles he was encountering?
Look, Mr. Weiss had, as I said from the beginning, at the very beginning, that he had authority over all matters that pertain to Hunter Biden.
Have you Have you learned that he was in fact deterred by decisions of the United States attorneys in the District of Columbia and the Northern District of California from proceeding as he thought best?
With respect, Congressman, Mr. Weiss has not said that he was deterred. He said that he followed the normal processes of the department, and that he was never denied the ability to bring a case in another jurisdiction.
Well, what changed then, Mr. Attorney General? What made you decide that it was sufficient to leave him in the situation he was until you decided to make him special counsel?
Mr. Weiss asked for that authority, given the extraordinary circumstances of this matter, and given my promise that I would give him any resources he requested, I made him special counsel.
So until that time, was it just a matter of his predilection, or did you undertake to investigate and discern what he was doing with his authority and whether he had faced any obstacles?
I did not endeavor to investigate because I had promised that I would not interfere with this investigation. The way to not interfere is to not investigate an investigation.
Once he requested to be named special counsel, having not done so over months and months of your tenure, did you ask him what had changed that made him now need to be a special counsel?
Mr. Weiss asked to be made special counsel. I had promised that I would give him all the resources he needed, and I made him special counsel.
When did the Justice Department permit statutes of limitations to expire on some of the prospective charges against Hunter Biden for tax violations?
I don't know anything about the statute of limitations here. The investigation was in the hands of Mr. Weiss to make the determinations that he thought were appropriate.
Are you unaware that statutes of limitations have in fact been allowed to expire after there having been tolling agreements in place?
I'm going to say again, the determination of where to bring cases and which kinds of cases to bring was left to Mr. Weiss.
Yes, sir. I understand that you've said that. That's part of the problem. The question is, are you aware that statutes of limitations have been allowed to expire while the matter was under investigation?
The investigators were fully familiar with all the
This case,
relevant law.
I'm not asking for the excuses. I'm asking whether you're aware of that fact, sir.
I'm going to say again. I'm going to say again and again if necessary. I did not interfere with, did not investigate, did not
See,
make
those are
determinations.
statements in response to other questions. Everybody in the country now knows who's paying attention to this, that the Justice Department permitted statutes of limitations to expire. Every lawyer who's ever practiced understands the implications of allowing statutes of limitations to expire. Do you not even know as you sit here whether that occurred or not?
Prosecutors make appropriate determinations on their own. In this case, I left it to Mr. Weiss whether to bring charges or not. That would include whether to let statute of limitations expire or not, whether there was sufficient evidence to bring a case that was subject to the statute of limitations or not, whether there were better cases to bring or not.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General, for being here with us this morning. You know, as much as we see dirt being thrown in the air, there's a lot of misinformation that I think is intended to confuse people. I would like to ask unanimous consent to put into the record 3 letters from Mr. Weiss that he sent to Congress on June 7th, June 30th, and July 10th.
Without objection.
He said over and over again that he has full authority over this case, including the ability to seek special counsel or special attorney status if needed. You know, trying to imply otherwise is just simply false. Mr. Weiss was appointed by then President Trump. Your decision was to leave the Trump-appointed attorney completely in charge of this, hands off from you. He makes all the calls without interference from the Attorney General. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so the idea that you would interfere is completely wrong. And I'd also like to ask, you talked about your independence from the president, but also your independence from the Congress. Have you ever come across historically an instance where the Congress of the United States tried to or successfully interfered with a prosecution initiated by the Department of Justice based on the facts and the law?
I want to be gentle about the word interfere, but it is, just as a historical example, in the case of Iran-Contra, the consequences of actions by the Congress were that the special counsel's investigation of Iran, of Mr. North, were dismissed.
Correct. Before I go into another question I have, I just would like unanimous consent to put into the record the annual statistical transparency report dated April of 2023. It indicates that the deduplicated counting method for FBI queries of U.S. persons under the Section 702 database numbered over 119,000. I would just like to note, and we will work with you, this committee on a bipartisan basis is very concerned about querying of the 702 database for U.S. persons without a warrant. We're not suggesting that the law does not permit that, but we are going to visit this issue because it is my view that querying the 702 database that has been collected without due process, because it relates to foreign individuals, is completely wrong in terms of the privacy rights of Americans. And I'm hoping that we can work successfully with you as we craft requirements for a warrant to do that querying. I'd like to ask, as we know, and has been mentioned by the ranking member, the proposal is basically to defund the police by the Republicans, to defund the FBI. I am concerned that if we defund the police, as the majority has suggested, that really doesn't have an impact on the statute of limitations. So if we were to defund the Department of Justice, defund the FBI and the police, as has been suggested, what would happen with the statute of limitations for cases that you were pursuing if you were not able to actually do that? Would they be suspended anyway, or would the criminals get off scot-free?
Well, I know in my experience as a judge, if I was asked a legal question and I don't know the answer, I would go back to the office and study it, and I'll have to do that in this case. I don't have the answer.
Well, I think I do, because there's nothing in the statute that allows for the statute of limitations to be suspended because the government has been shut down or because the police have been defunded through the budget process. And I just think we ought to take the implications of a shutdown very seriously in terms of allowing criminals to get off. And I see that my time has expired, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair does not recognize himself. Quote, Mr. Weiss has full authority to bring cases in other jurisdictions if he feels it's necessary. That was your response, Attorney General, to Senator Grassley's question on March 1st, 2023. You just referenced it when Mr. Bishop was questioning you. Only problem is he'd already been turned down by the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, Mr. Graves. So he didn't have full authority, did he?
I had an extended conversation with Senator Grassley at the time. We briefly touched on the Section 515 question and how that process went. I've never been suggested.
My point's real simple, Mr. Garland. You said he had complete authority, but he'd already been turned down. He wanted to bring an action in the District of Columbia, and the U.S. Attorney there said, no, you can't. And then you go tell the United States Senate under oath that he has complete authority. I'm
going to say again that no one had the authority to turn him down. They could refuse to partner with him. They could not.
You can use whatever language. Refuse to partner is turning down.
Well, it's not the same under a well-known Justice Department practice. Here's
why the statute of limitations question is important that Mr. Bishop was getting at just a few minutes ago. Here's why it's important. You let the statute of limitations lapse for 2014, 2015. Those were the years with the felony tax charges where Hunter Biden was getting income from Burisma. Here are 4 facts that I think are so important. Hunter Biden was put on the board of Burisma, made a lot of money, got paid a lot of money over those years. $2 million. He wasn't qualified. Fact number 2, he wasn't qualified to be on the board of Burisma. Not my words, his words. He said he got on the board because of his last name. The brand, as Devin Archer said when he was under oath and we deposed him. Fact number 3, Burisma executives told Hunter Biden, we're under pressure, we need help. Fact number 4, Joe Biden goes to Ukraine, leverages our tax money, American people's tax money, to get the prosecutor fired who was applying the pressure. Interestingly enough, that fact is entirely consistent with what the confidential human source told the FBI, and they recorded in the 1023 form, the same form Mr. Wray didn't want to let this committee and the Congress see. That all happened. That all happened. And what I'm wondering is why you guys let the statute of limitations lapse for those tax years that dealt with Burisma income.
There's one more fact that's important, and that is that this investigation was being conducted by Mr. Weiss, an appointee of President Trump. You will, at the appropriate time, have the opportunity to ask Mr. Weiss that question, and he will no doubt address it in the public report that will be transmitted to the Congress. I don't know the answer to those questions.
Did they forget? Did the lawyers just like let it, did they just like, oh, darn, we let it, were they careless?
I expect that won't be what he says, but because I
You
promised...
know that's not the case, because as Mr. Bishop pointed out, they had a tolling agreement. They talked to Hunter Biden's defense counsel and say, let's extend the statute of limitations. And then at some point, they made an intentional decision to say, we're gonna let the statute of limitations lapse. And I wanna know who decided that and why they did it.
Mr. Weiss was a supervisor of the investigation at that time and at all times. He made the appropriate decisions, and you'll be able to ask him that question, and he will.
You know why they did it. Everyone knows why they did it. May not say it, but everyone knows why they did it. They didn't, those tax years, that dealt with that involved the president. It's one thing to have a gun charge in Delaware. That doesn't involve the president of the United States. But Burisma, oh my, that goes right to the White House. We can't have that. And we can slow walk this thing along. We can even extend the statute of limitations, and then we can intentionally let it lapse. And we know this investigation was slow. Here's what everyone said. Shapley said, DOJ slow walked the investigation. Ziegler, slow walking in the approvals of everything. This happened at the Delaware's attorney's office and DOJ tax level. Mr. Sobocinski, the FBI agent, said, I would have liked to see things move faster. Ms. Holly said the same. Every witness we've talked to said this thing was slow walked, and we know why. They slow walked it long enough to let the statute of limitations run so they wouldn't have to get into Burisma. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I'm asking Mr. Garland the
I
question.
think I've tried to make clear that I don't know the specifics of the investigation. Much of what you are describing occurred during the Trump administration, during a Justice Department appointed by President Trump.
No, it didn't. This is 4.5 years, this investigation. We're talking about the last few years. Your statement was just this year, March 1st, to Senator Grassley.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to respond to your descriptions of what the IRS agents said about certain things.
Statute of limitations is 6 years. That lapsed here in the Biden administration.
On the statute of limitations, we'll say again that the explanation for why the statute of limitation was lapsed, if it was, has to come from Mr. Weiss.
My time is expired. Let me ask one last question real quick here. Who decided that David Weiss would stay on as U.S. attorney?
Look, this had occurred before I came. Mr. Weiss had been kept on. I promised the...
no, I didn't say, you can walk all through that. I said, who decided? The White House decided.
Mr. Weiss,
right? They serve at the pleasure of the president, right?
Mr. Weiss was...
Joe Biden decided to keep David Weiss as U.S. attorney. You weren't sworn in until March. He was told he was going to stay on in February. Pretty fundamental question. Who decided David Weiss was going to stay as U.S. attorney in Delaware?
Mr. Weiss,
your time has expired.
Mr. Chairman, your time has expired.
I'm waiting for an answer, and then I'll yield.
Well, you asked the question after your time had expired already. Point of order.
Gentleman can respond, then I'll go to Ms. Jackson-Lee.
Mr. Weiss was the special U.S. attorney from the District of Delaware when I came on. He had been appointed by President Trump. I promised that he would be permitted to stay on for this investigation, and that is what happened.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from New York's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you misquoted from the transcript of the Senate hearing. I therefore ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the entire transcript of the Senate hearing.
without objection, but I didn't
Thank you.
misquote what Mr. Garland said. Ms. Jackson Lee from Texas, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. None of the Republicans' goals today include solving Americans' problems of which they are concerned of. There are many reasons, Mr. Attorney General, that prosecutors decline to bring charges. One of those reasons is that they don't have any evidence for a conviction. That is the justice way. That is just in America. So let me raise these questions and concerns with you today. As we all know, Republicans have repeatedly alleged that the DOJ and FBI are conspiring to shield the Biden family from public criticism and giving Hunter Biden special treatment in its investigations. They have demonized law enforcement officials working with this case at every turn, which has directly led to increased threats against FBI officials, law enforcement, of which they pretend to support. I want to place into the record 2 excerpts from recent transcribed interviews, and I would ask that copies be made available to you. The first is from a June interview with Jennifer Moore, FBI's former Executive Assistant Director for Human Resources. She told this committee that FBI had received so many threats that it had to stand up an entire 10-person unit just to deal with them. She said it is unprecedented. It's a number we have never had before. More testimony, pages 202 to 203. The second excerpt is from an interview earlier this month with Thomas Sobocinski, the special agent in charge of FBI's Baltimore field office. Here's what he said. I joined the FBI 25 years ago. I joined for a reason, to protect the American people, uphold the Constitution. I've been to war. My family's been in bad places. My kids have been evacuated from war zones or quasi-war zones. I've been in some bad things. I have accepted that. I am solely focused on 2 things, and they're not mutually exclusive. The first is, like every investigation, I want to get to a resolution in a fair, apolitical way. The second thing, it's becoming more important and more relevant, is keeping my folks safe. And that part, I've never expected to have to be able to be concerned about keeping families safe, so that for me, this is becoming more and more of a job that I have to do and take away from what I was assigned or signed up to do, which was to investigate and do these things. So when you talk about potential frustrations with communication, I am personally frustrated with anything that places my employees and their families in enhanced danger. Our children, their children did not sign up for this. Mr. Attorney General, do you agree that politically charged rhetoric claiming that law enforcement agents, and I have many questions if you could be brief, are corrupt and contribute to this onslaught of threats against public servants?
Okay, as I said in my opening statement, we have had an astounding number of threats against public servants over the last several years. I think that when career public servants in the Justice Department and in election workers and airline crews, when they are singled out, this can lead to threats of violence and actual violence. We have the actual example of an attack on an FBI office by somebody who was incensed by political rhetoric. This does happen. We must not allow that to happen in this country.
Does the rhetoric regarding the Biden case have any basis in reality?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that first part.
Does the rhetoric regarding the Biden case have any basis in reality?
No, it does not.
How does this impact FBI and DOJ employees' ability to do their work? I think you mentioned specifically FBI and DOJ employees.
As I've already said, the agents of the FBI and the prosecutors understand that criticism comes with their job, and they will continue to do their jobs without fear or favor. But the idea of threatening their safety or that of their families is just abhorrent.
Thank you. And I assume that provisions have had to be in place to protect these agents and their families.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
I assume that provisions or protections have had to be in place to protect these agents and their families.
Yes, that's correct.
Let me move on. Thank you very much, Mr. General. Let me move on to the fentanyl crisis, and I want to introduce H.R. 4272. But let me just put on the record so that you can probably summarize, and I ask for the indulgence of my chair, but in any event, that the FBI, the DOJ are focused, needlepoint focused, if you will, on the crisis of fentanyl. I want to just raise that for you, and then I just want to follow up with one or two other questions, if you would be able to comment on these collectively. I am dealing with the crisis of human trafficking and the prioritizing of America's children. They are under siege. And the level of child sexual abuse materials generating into human trafficking, and I want to put HR 30 on the record, indicates from ICAC that there are 99,000 IP cases where they're enticing children, and maybe only 1% of them being investigated. I'd like your comment on that. And finally, in the approach of of Yom Kippur, to emphasize the work that is hopefully still being doing with anti-Semitism, attacks on immigrants, and African Americans and Latinos. If you would answer those questions, fentanyl, the human trafficking, and then domestic terrorism.
These are all horrendous problems propagated by people who are truly evil. We are fighting the fentanyl scourge in every possible way, starting with the precursors in China, to the labs in Mexico, to the cartels that are bringing the drugs into the United States, to their networks in the United States, to the streets of America. And we will continue to do that with every resource that Congress gives us. Human smuggling and sex trafficking are obviously abhorrent. The Justice Department has task forces on both of these subjects and has brought many, many cases on these subjects. The idea of putting sexually explicit material about children on the web is another area that we are continuing to investigate and to prosecute and to ask the social media to take down from their sites.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman's floor is recognized 5 minutes.
I guess I'm just wondering, Mr. Attorney General, has anyone at the department told President Biden to knock it off with Hunter? I mean, you guys are charging Hunter Biden on some crimes, investigating him on others. You've got the president bringing Hunter Biden around to state dinners. Has anyone told him to knock it off?
Our job in the Justice Department is to pursue our cases without reference to what's happening in the outside world.
Just yes or no. Have you done that?
That is what we do.
So it's a no?
No one that I know of has spoken to the White House about the Hunter Biden case.
I'm wondering then.
Of course not.
Okay, I got it. So Hunter Biden is selling art to pay for his $15,000 a month rent in Malibu. How can you guarantee that the people buying that art aren't doing so to gain favor with the president?
The job of the Justice Department is to investigate criminal allegations. You have information.
Are you investigating this? I mean, someone who bought Hunter Biden's art ended up with a prestigious appointment to a federal position. Doesn't it look weird that he's become this immediate success in the art world as his dad is president of the United States? Isn't that odd?
I'm not going to comment about any specific.
Not going to comment, not going to investigate. So
right.
Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer told us that Hunter sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident he has stopped doing that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer told us that Hunter sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident he has stopped?
I'm going to say again that all these matters are within the purview of Mr. Weiss. I have not interfered with them, and I do not.
But if you were confident that he had stopped, you could.
And I do not
probably
intend
tell
to
us.
interfere with
Yeah,
him.
So it was a lot of Chinese money that was working its way through these shell companies into the accounts of the Biden family. So the China initiative was set up during the Trump administration at the Department of Justice to go after the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party. And the Biden Justice Department dissolved the China initiative. So I guess I'm wondering, does the department have any documents that would detail the basis for why you got rid of the China initiative that President Trump had set up?
The Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division gave a long speech which explained that. He has testified before Congress several times. We'd be happy to provide you with
What's the basis? Just tell us all now. Why was the China initiative dissolved?
What the Assistant Attorney General said was that we face attacks from 4 nation states: North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran, and that we need to focus our attention on the broad range of these attacks. Sometimes we don't know.
Wait a second. Are you saying that North Korea has the same malign influence risk to the United States as the Chinese Communist Party? Are you trying to represent there's some parity there? Because here's what it looks like. It looks like the Chinese gave all this money to the Bidens, and then you guys came in and got rid of the China initiative, and it was successful. Like, I saw one rationale that you guys got rid of the China initiative because it was racial profiling. But one of the people you convicted was a guy named Charles Lieber, who was a Harvard professor taking $50,000 a month to do China's bidding and give them whatever research was being done. Are you aware of the millions of dollars that moved through Rob Walker's shell companies from Chinese Communist Party entities into Biden family bank accounts? Are you aware of that?
There were a lot of questions that you just asked. Let me start with the first one about North Korea. North Korea is a dangerous actor, both kinetically and with respect to cyber.
But not on par with China. I'm on the Armed Services
I'm not in the
Committee, Mr.
business
Attorney
right
General.
now.
It makes you look unserious to suggest
May
that.
I answer your question or not?
Answer the question about whether or not you know about all the millions of dollars that
So
moved
you
through
don't
Rob
want me to
Walker's
answer about North Korea?
I already know the answer, and so does everyone. They're not the same risk as China. So let's get on to serious questions and serious answers. Do you know about the money that moved through Rob Walker's shell companies, yes or no?
As I have said repeatedly, I have left these matters to Mr. Weiss. I've not
Blissfully
intruded.
ignorant.
I've not interfered.
Blissfully
I've
ignorant
not
to these
tried to
things.
find out what
It's
he
like
knows.
you're looking the other way on purpose because everybody knows this stuff's happening. And you know what? People don't pay bribes to not get something in return. Right? The China initiative resulted in the convictions of a Harvard professor, of someone at Monsanto. So we were working against the Chinese. They paid the Bidens, and now you're sitting here telling me that North Korea is the big threat. I got to get to this one thing on January 6th. So did the FBI lose count of the number of paid informants on January 6th?
Let me answer your question about China.
I want you to answer this question. I only get 5 minutes. You've already sort of, I think, screwed the pooch on China. So January 6th, did you lose count of the number of federal assets? Did you lose count and order an audit?
Gentleman's time has expired.
I get an answer to the question of did they lose count?
No, let him answer the question.
The time has expired. The Attorney General can respond.
China is the most aggressive, most dangerous adversary that the United States faces, and we are doing everything within our power to rebut that, to stop that, to prevent their invasions, both kinetic, and through cyberspace. And we will continue to do that.
If someone gave that answer in your courtroom when you were a judge, you would tell them they were being non-responsive and you would direct them to answer the question.
Point of order, Your Honor.
Time is,
Badgering the witness.
Point of
Time
order,
has
please.
expired.
I got it. I was
You like
laughing.
Your Honor? You want to stick with that?
Yeah, I was getting laughed at to call me Your Honor.
Point of order either way.
Okay, I understand that too.
All right.
But the gentleman asked his question before his time expired. The Attorney General did not respond to the gentleman's question. I was hoping he would respond to the question about the confidential human sources on January 6th. He didn't respond to that. I'm sure we're going to get an answer to that later.
Of course,
now,
Mr. Chairman.
Now
There were
recognize
8
the
questions
gentleman.
before that he was not given a chance to answer.
Understand,
So
but
the witness might have thought.
But the witness doesn't, Mr. Chairman, point of order. The witness does not control the time.
Hang on, exactly right. Members control the time. If they want to switch their question and focus on one more question that they'd like an answer to, I want to give the witness a chance to respond to that final question that Mr. Gates asked. He didn't respond to it. Someone else is going to ask it, I'm sure. We now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I'll just follow up a few of the questions we were asked here. Did Devin Archer not say Joe Biden did nothing wrong?
Be clear, I only know about Mr. Archer from newspaper reports. I want to be clear that I kept my promise to not involve myself in this investigation.
Okay, I'll state it. He said that Joe Biden did nothing wrong. Secondly, did you say that President Trump appointed Weiss, who then you appointed?
Yes, President Trump appointed Mr. Weiss as United States Attorney.
So that should take care of that issue. And they say the department's been weaponized. Wasn't there an investigation of Mr. Gates and you didn't prosecute him?
Justice Department does not make comments about its investigation.
Well, it shows we're not weaponized. If we were weaponized, we'd have done it. That was a beautiful exchange there, and it shows we didn't do that. You are the nation's chief law enforcement officer, and I appreciate that. And law enforcement's one of our government's fundamental functions. Crime is growing too much in this country and in my city of Memphis as well. We need law enforcement to be effective, swift, and fair. I'd like to focus my questions on what actually affects the American people.
Hey, Lovey Bugs.
Crime.
I decided to finally
How do we
make an
get
appearance
smarter
here.
law enforcement,
So,
requiring
over the
smart
top of this
resource
chicken-eating
allocations,
fool.
not about funding or less funding, but the right funding for the right programs, and see that happens. Memphis, as hiring has become more difficult, we've lowered our standards to get more officers. That's not the way to do it. The COPS program is helping us review the policy and procedures, and I thank you, the COPS program, for doing that. But what can
Yeah, Matt did a
Department of
good
Justice
job laying
do
down
to
the
help
smack,
see
boy.
that law enforcement is more efficient and more effective?
So the key to this is our partnership, the FBI, DEA, Marshals, ATF's partnership at every local level with local and state law enforcement.
God, man, what is this guy, 97?
In task forces,
Like he's all adrenochromed
in
out.
discussions to target the most dangerous criminals in those communities, but at the same time to engage the
And these
communities
questions.
to help engender community
What would
trust in
happen,
law
Attorney
enforcement.
Garland,
Everyone
if the
who's,
FBI would just
prosecuted
go
violent crime
away?
cases, and that includes me,
Ooh,
knows that
ooh,
you need the
lions
trust
and
of the community
tigers
in order
and
to get
bears,
witnesses.
oh my.
We in the Justice Department are helping our state and local colleagues do just that. The funding you described from the COPS office and in the Office of Justice Programs allows us to give money to state
By
and
the
local
way, I
police
apologize for
organizations
the,
that are having trouble
F-bombs my wife
with
drops.
recruitment and retention and promotion of law
She,
officers.
she
and
has
helps
functional
them,
neurological disorder. I just call her
make
functionally retarded.
their departments respectful of constitutional rights and at the same time effective in the investigation and prosecution of criminal law violations.
Thank you for those activities, those programs through COPS. You've also reinstituted patterns and practices investigations of certain police departments, and Memphis is one of them, and I thank you for doing that.
Thank God you're chasing that
Can you share with us how
racism.
important those pilot programs are and how they can improve policing?
Yes, Congress has authorized the Justice Department to conduct pattern or practice investigations when they have a reasonable belief.
Let me just make a point to you that explaining all the good things that the FBI and the Justice Department does is no excuse for doing the bad things. Right? It's just, you're just saying, okay, yeah, they do some good things because there's like, I don't know, 80,000 people in the Justice Department probably, or 100,000 people, right? The government, U.S. government is the largest employer in the country, right? So of course there's going to be some good people and they're going to do some good things to cover up all the bad things.
In reaching consent agreements.
Thank you, sir. You were part of announced bringing of charges, federal charges against the 5 officers who killed Tyree Nichols in Memphis, and I thank you for that. We need that.
Yeah, we need
federal,
justice for Tyree
charge,
Nichols.
and we need our department looked at. If there's a shutdown of the federal government, how will that affect the Department of Justice and affect policing in local communities?
I haven't
crime
done
will
a
go up,
complete
of course.
calculation on the effects of a shutdown and the difference between which employees are indispensable under the statute and which ones not. It will certainly disrupt all of our normal programs, including
Good,
our
defund
grant
it all
programs to state
I want to
and
disrupt the
local
programs.
law enforcement, and to our ability to conduct our normal efforts with respect to the entire scope of our activities, including helping state and locals fight violent crime.
Thank
Yeah,
you, sir, and
and
happy New Year,
infiltrate
and I yield
Catholic
back the balance of
churches.
my time.
Gentleman yields back.
Find the
The gentleman,
extremists.
Mr. McClintock from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, looking again at the appointment of Jack Smith and David Weiss, this double standard of justice couldn't be more glaring. Jack Smith was deeply involved in the IRS scandal that targeted conservative political groups to harass. His malicious prosecution of former Governor McDonnell was unanimously overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Chief Justice Roberts rebuked Smith directly for attempting to criminalize political activity. You appointed him
Captain Jack
to prosecute Joe Biden's chief rival for the presidency.
Yep, Donald Trump.
And then we have the appointment of David Weiss.
Totally unpolitical.
Weiss deliberately allowed the statute of limitations to run out on any charges that could have implicated Joe Biden in influence peddling.
And by the way, if
He
you didn't know
originally
it,
offered
Weiss had to be approved by 2 Democratic senators to be able to be a judge. So
And
Trump
he's the
appointed my
one
ass.
You appointed to pursue the charges that could implicate Joe Biden.
He was Trump appointed.
That leads me to only 2 explanations, either corruption or incompetence. So which is it?
Those are the kind of questions that judges would rule out of order.
I'm sure you would. Which is it?
Look, I said before, and I will say again, Mr. Weiss was the Republican-appointed United States Attorney appointed by
But this-
President
this-
Trump.
do you at least see
Broken
the obvious double standard applied in these two appointments?
Mr. Weiss was a Republican appointee. Mr. Smith is
Republican in name
not
only.
registered to either party. His
rhino.
entire
I don't care
career
what
was
their
as
party
a career
registrations
prosecutor.
are. I'm not
That
asking what
does
their
not
party
seem like a
registrations
double
are. I'm
standard.
asking about their records and how those records would commend them to the appointments that you made.
Right.
This is a question of
They're not even
judgment,
supposed to
and
have
it's
an
a question
appearance of
motive.
evil. You
what
understand,
was
right?
motivating you to do this?
Mr. Smith had a nationwide reputation for integrity and for
please, not
appropriate prosecution. His work can be measured by what he actually has filed. Everyone in the country can see the indictments
How can you
that he
say
has
that
charged. Those-
after he was so heavily implicated in the IRS scandal or the rebuke that the Supreme Court gave and many other examples?
right.
But let me go on.
Keep going, buddy.
We've had two IRS whistleblowers inform Congress of attempts by senior
at least if we
Justice
can't throw 'em in
Department
jail, we can
officials
beat
to
the crap
obstruct
out
the
of 'em.
criminal investigation
Give 'em a bad
into
day.
millions of dollars of ill-gotten and undeclared income to Hunter Biden. They noted several deviations by department officials from normal process that provided preferential treatment, in this case to Hunter Biden, a direct quote, including allowing the statute of limitations to lapse, requesting IRS and FBI management level investigative communications, prohibiting investigators from referring to the big guy or dad in witness interviews, excluding the investigative team from meetings with defense counsel, and notifying defense counsel of
working
a
so much
pending
better with
search
a new
warrants.
memory.
U.S. Attorney's Office even
Memory's
tipped off the
helping.
Bidens of an impending search of a storage unit where their records were being kept. Now, that sounds an awful lot like obstruction of justice to me. Was that coming from you or from somebody else?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
I don't understand the
Can we
question.
burn some more time?
All of the actions that your employees took to obstruct the investigation of Hunter Biden and the earnings that he made and the taxes he failed to declare, their source, and ultimately who they were paid to.
I'm going to say again with respect to the Hunter Biden investigation that it has been and still is in the hands of Mr. Weiss, an appointee of President Trump. I don't know about all of these allegations. Some of them appear to have been from the period when the Attorney General appointed by President Trump was still the Attorney General.
Do these charges trouble you at all?
Mr. Weiss will have an opportunity to explain the decisions.
Well, you're the guy in charge.
You're the guy in
Does this trouble
charge,
you?
right? Just answer the fucking question.
I have intentionally not involved myself in the facts of
How
the case, not
convenient.
because I'm trying to get out of responsibility, but because I'm trying to pursue my responsibility.
Your FBI
Liar.
director
You're a
testified
liar.
before this committee of an uptick in, quote, known or suspected terrorists coming across the southern border. And he told us that the southern border represents a massive security threat. Those were his words, a massive security threat. Do you agree?
I am perfectly happy to align myself with the director of the FBI.
Well, why is it then that we, senior administration, rescind the Trump-era orders that had secured that border? I mean, we've seen an exponential increase
Time of
in
the gentleman.
suspected terrorists.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The witness can respond if he chooses.
This is the answer to this question about immigration law is an extremely long answer. I would defer to the Department of Homeland Security, which is responsible for the physical security and about first contact at the border. With
Well, we've
respect-
tried to get
that would
answers
be the
from him. He
first
didn't
place
give
you'd
them to
fight
us, so
fentanyl.
we're hoping you would. I understand, Mr. Attorney General, you've requested a short break, so we'll take a short break and resume in 5 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
All right, short break. So now I can talk. I'm stepping over that. I'm sorry. Welcome if you're just tuning in. My name is Tim. I am your truth slinger. You can call me either one. And while you're liking, subscribing, and sharing all that, hit the notification bell so you will know when we go live. If that even works on YouTube anymore, I'm not sure. So we're listening to Merrick Garland, Lie Like a Dead Dog. Yeah, he's laying it on thick, boy. And the Democrats, they're just, oh, I don't know, they're outraged about this. How could you dare question law enforcement? And isn't it awful? What happens when you question the DOJ? Oh my God, all of democracy is going to end. Ah. So there's just hysteria, demagoguery. You know when a Democrat gets up there and they read a speech and they're testifying and they're not asking questions, right? And if you're going to do that, at least put it under the guise of questions, like Matt Gaetz, who was pretty slick. He's a ninja. So, yeah, interesting. I mean, no, he's lying through his teeth, but at least we're getting it on record. And I think every single day people are getting more and more and more black-pilled. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, what about all the black people that are gone to jail on gun charges, right? But, they almost let him slide, right? And, they just, whoopsie, let the statute of limitations fail. Not to mention the fact that if it takes 7 years to investigate something, then either you're dragging your feet, or let's talk about the fact that you're totally fucking incompetent, right? And that and that you guys can't seem to do a simple investigation of, okay, did he lie about doing drugs at the time or not do drugs at the time, right? It's just ridiculous. And all this pretrial, diversion shit they tried to pull and all this. And now he's going to sit up there with a straight face and tell the American people, right, and the Democrats about, going to weave this story of how they're independent. They are not politically motivated by anything they do whatsoever. 39 or however many indictments, right? So how many years in prison for Donald Trump? Oh no, none of that's not political. But if you try and say that anything we did about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, well, how dare you, sir? How dare you question the integrity of the FBI and the DOJ, man? You lunatic. It's just so transparent, right? I would say it's vomitatious, right? Was that a good word? So I baked cookies this morning, right? I got the last one. Unfortunately, you can't smell it. If this were smell, whoops. Ooh, it's good. Double chocolate. It was cocoa cookies, right? Chocolate cookies with, I didn't have any peanut butter chips left, so I used chocolate chips, semi-sweet, and walnuts, and a little bit of shredded coconut. Ooh, breakfast cookies, nothing like them, man. Breakfast of champions. So, yeah, it's so obvious, dude. It is so obvious that it's good. I used to not be able to stand, right, to listen to the Democrats, right? Hang on. I used to not be able to take it because it would just drive me nuts because I'm like going, oh, man, they're allowed to say it and people are going to believe this drivel and this bullshit. And now it's like I totally realize that it is so obviously transparent now that anytime a Democrat opens their mouth, like I don't know if you saw it when AOC and Jerry Nadler went downtown New York City. Oh, yeah, New York City wasn't having it. And I don't know if you're keeping up on what the hell's going on in New York, but they tried to block a bus last night and they arrested people, parents and shit at like midnight last night. And they're pulling that same kind of crap. I'll play it later. I don't have it queued up right now, or maybe I will. Maybe I'll look into my Twitter feed. Maybe it's in there. But yeah, they're hauling them away, and they're doing the same shit they did in Montreal when the truckers did their whole freedom rally, and the cops came out and they just move, 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 and then anybody that refuses to move, they pick them off one at a time, right, and take them into custody, and that's what they're doing. And so New York City has devolved into a totalitarian police state, which it's a total mess, man. It is completely come apart. And Eric Adams, Democrat, stands in front of city council, and the entire city council behind him has voted Democrat and for Joe Biden the whole time. And he's up there whining about, oh, this is going to destroy New York City. Well, yeah, no shit. But yet, he's speaking out against how awful and shameful what the parents did last night trying to prevent the migrants from getting bussed in the middle of the night, right? I got video and footage of school buses running down the road, right, with the windows all blacked out, right? Well, what do you suppose is going on in there, right? It's all over the place. A couple of planefuls of people just landed. Where? What city? Boston? How many? Yeah, a couple of plane loads just got dropped off. Not to mention, have you been keeping an eye on Lampedusa? Yeah, Lampedusa, man. It's an island off the coast of Italy, right? I guess it's just off the heel or the tip of the boot, or I don't know, some shit like that. Lampedusa. As of yesterday, I reported on the current situation was the fact that there are 6,000 residents on the island, live there, the locals. And as of yesterday, there were 7,000 migrants there, 1.1 migrant to every local. And they're setting up a no-go zone, right, where the police can't go, like in Pakistan, like in the Pashtun district, right, the lawless district. Yeah, they're setting one of them up. Oh, but that's not it. No. There's more. Yeah. As of this morning, guess what the number is? It's 18,000 military-aged sub-Saharan African men. 18,000. It's 3-1. What the hell are they going to do? This just happened last night. Are they going to abandon the island? What the hell are they going to do? All right? Is the military going to take the island back? Or are they just going to cede sovereign Italian territory? No. You tell me.
Conservative now.
Italy's super conservative. Yeah. So I think something's going to touch off there. I think they're going to round them sons of bitches up and throw them off the island, or they better. We're going to find out if they got a spine right now, right? But this shit is happening in our cities. It's all over, and it is coordinated effort. And they took out all the stops, and the whole while we're listening to Merrick Garland. Okay. Oh my God, I don't know how long it's been you watching, right? But the Democrat tees up this question, tell us all about, the biggest things that you're doing and what the great shit is you're doing. And, they're fighting we're fighting the fentanyl crisis, and we're just working so hard. Right? And how's that going with a totally fucking wide open border? How's that going? How is it going? Right? Everything is a total mess. And I tweeted, now let me tell you something. Love bugs. I tweeted last night, okay, some shit, and it's the most popular tweet I've ever done. And a friend of ours, Wendy Patterson, okay, tweeted about this whole bullshit that we are getting involved in some green shit with China, and it's some summit and this and that and the other thing, and all the really, disgusting players are involved in this thing. And they're going to go do all this. And she said, basically, you watch. As soon as this funding package goes through and this stuff is going to happen, okay? I mean, we're moving toward the one world government so fast, okay, that it would make your head spin, right? And so I wrote a response tweet. And I said, yeah, man, it's too late for an election to fix any of this shit now. If you think an election is going to fix this, you're screwed. And what I meant by that was the fact that I know every single institution in this country, the elementary school, the kindergartens, okay, the libraries, the colleges, the high schools, right? They've all been infiltrated by Marxists. Then you've got all these non-governmental agencies that the government figured out how to partner with, the Democrats, a long time ago, the NGOs. Who are doing the dirty work, right? The military-industrial complex is fucking jacked, right? The media-industrial complex is jacked. The media is nothing but an arm of an authoritarian government and tells you what you need to know and nothing more. And they'll decide what it is you need to know, right? And this whole bullshit with the invasion of other ideologies. Look, Nobody you or I know that's conservative has a problem with legal immigration. As long as you get to the point where you take a damn oath to the Constitution and you take a civics fucking test and you come here and you go and even maybe take a lie detector test and say, I love this country. Yeah, right? No problem with that. Don't care what color you are. Don't care what language you speak. As a matter of fact, you're going to bring some good food probably with you, some good recipes. None of us are racists. Fuck that shit, right? That's all a lie. It's all a lie, right? We want that kind of stuff. But when you start bringing in and creating little Somalia inside of United States of America, right? Or a place where they can have Sharia law inside your country, right? You now have small countries within your country. I don't think that's a good idea, right? I sure as shit don't think it's a good idea to have Chinese police departments in this country. Hell no, right? We have systematically been broken down. And I mean, I feel every day I wake up and I feel like I'm buck-ass naked. Like we as a country are buck-ass naked. Okay, and we are bent over and we are grabbing our ankles and the world is doing whatever the hell it wants. And we're all screaming that America's bent over, buck naked, spreading its cheeks, just inviting people. And they're going, what are you talking about? The emperor has so many beautiful clothes on. You don't know what you're talking about. And the cognitive dissonance, right, that goes on in my head on a daily basis, right? Which is why that song resonated with everyone, right? Rich Men North of Richmond. If you haven't heard it, you got to listen to it, right? That song expresses the deep, heartfelt cry of the common man that's really getting tired of getting pissed on in the face and being told it's raining, and it's nice, warm rain, so you should appreciate it, right? Tired of getting whitewashed, everything. Tired of getting gaslit all the time, right? That's what this hearing is. It's being gaslit. All right, we're back, man. I'm gonna turn this back up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General.
Oh, I hate this guy. He's the regal black man.
The nation watches as the Republicans have no answer for why they want to focus and obsess on Hunter Biden receiving $2 million from Burisma after serving on a board that he said he was not qualified to serve on, but yet the Saudi Arabians gave $2 billion to Jared Kushner, who conducted Middle East strategy for his dear old dad, Donald Trump. He got $2 billion for something that he is not equipped to do, which is investment banking. And so Republicans looking at Hunter Biden instead of Jared Kushner, Americans don't understand how that could be.
Well, because how about he's in power right now, and he's the president. His father happens to be the president, and this happens to stink of possibly influence peddling. How about that? Because it's current news right now.
Biden. Number two is to shut down, is to impeach or get rid of Kevin McCarthy, actually. And the third is to shut down government. And a subset of that is to defund the DOJ and the FBI.
Rhetoric.
To hold Donald Trump accountable. So the American people are watching that, and they also appreciate the fact that you've had a distinguished career as a prosecutor and a DOJ official, as well as 24 years on the bench. You served on the second highest court of the land as a judge for 24 years, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. We appreciate your service. You were for 7 years the lead. You managed that entire office. We thank you for that. You also served on the Judicial Council for a number of years, and so you are steeped in the rule of law.
Steeped in the rule of law.
You are a judge extraordinaire. And as a judge, you never had the occasion to
A judge extraordinaire.
private jet travel to an exotic location by a corporate billionaire, did you?
What's
You
that
cut your
question
mic
for?
on.
What the hell is that question even for?
No,
You never received an offer to get a ride on a private jet?
no.
Did you take any vacations at exclusive resorts paid for by a billionaire?
I know these are not hypothetical questions, and I think this is really
yes or
not
no?
within my
Yeah, really. At least
realm,
don't answer those. Those are so stupid.
You were a judge extraordinaire, and you know the rules of ethics for judges because your bench had to, was covered.
This guy is one of the worst diversity hires I've ever seen.
Federal appellate and district judges are covered by the Code of Conduct.
You would never have had somebody to pay for your godson's tuition to private school.
This is
Yeah, no,
stupid.
I don't want to answer these kind of hypothetical.
Good. These are stupid questions.
To me, they're hypothetical questions. What I would say is that I always, as a judge, and I've said this before and quite publicly and long ago, always held myself to the highest standards of ethical responsibility imposed by the code,
That's
really
about
all I can
right,
answer
D.
here.
And it's required that judges and justices avoid even appearances of impropriety.
You want to talk about a house Negro?
Again, I know you're asking this both hypothetically and non-hypothetically. All I can say is I follow the code of judicial conduct and includes avoiding appearances. That's
Well,
right.
let me ask you this question.
Oh, that's good.
Whitehouse.
Avoiding the appearances of evil. Are you kidding me? When was the last time you fucking heard that? Oh.
To refer the matter of Clarence Thomas being in violation of the Ethics in Government Act to the Justice Department. And after that, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, along with myself and others, requested that you take that matter up directly. Have you responded to either one of those letters? And if not, why not? And what action have you taken pursuant to those letters?
Gentleman may respond.
I assume that if you sent the letter, we have it, and I'll speak to the Office of Legislative Affairs about where it is at this point.
Is
The time the gentleman has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa.
Thank you. Good day, Mr. Attorney General. And this may be the reason that it's good for you to leave the Chief Justice and that group before each of us speak, because you would have already heard all that. I want to thank you personally for your office and your engagement on Camp Lejeune and on obviously a vast amount of litigation. That is.
See you later, love bugs, man. Good to see you. Drop back.
One of the jobs that falls at our feet here is that we are watchdogs of the executive branch. You have previously said that you are not Congress's attorney, and you've said you're not the president's attorney. And I'm assuming that you're neither our prosecutor nor our defense attorney, and you are neither the president's prosecutor nor defense attorney. And that's why today's investigation really does deal with the fact that if you're not, by definition, the president's prosecutor, but we have an obligation to see whether or not the president or a member of his family or in concert with the president's activities, in fact, need to be overseen, admonished, or even prosecuted. And so I have a couple of questions for you, and one of them is that you have not said this very much today, but you often say, I cannot comment on that because it's an ongoing investigation. And when we ask for information, you very commonly say that it is the policy, not the law, but the policy of the Department of Justice not to provide information related to an ongoing investigation. So far, I'm on track. Is that correct?
I think I've said more than it's just a policy. I think the letters we've sent trace it to the constitutional separation of powers, to Rule 6E of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, et cetera. But in general, I'm in accord with what you're saying.
So one of the challenges we face is that just a matter of weeks ago, a federal judge found the actions of now special prosecutor to be so outside what he could agree to, that he pushed back on a plea settlement and nullified it and sent the U.S. attorney going back. In light of that, don't you think it's appropriate for that portion to be considered a pre-ongoing investigation, and for Congress to legitimately look at the activities leading up to that failed plea bargain, rather than wait until weeks, months, or years from now a case is fully settled?
Yeah. So if you'll give me a chance, first, I don't agree with the characterization of what happened in the plea. The district judge performed her obligations under Rule 11 to determine whether the parties were in agreement as to what each had agreed to, and determined that they were not. Plea fell apart, as you know. There's been another prosecution, so that leads to the second thing. We are in, Mr. Weiss is in the midst of an ongoing prosecution on the very matter that you're talking about.
Okay, but Mr. Attorney General, if we believe, and we do, at least on this side of the dais, that a pattern of behavior is occurring relative to the investigation of Hunter Biden, particularly and including, well, he lived in the vice president's home, well, he operated commingled with the vice president, and even today as he travels with the president. So in light of that, can you agree that, in fact, it should be reasonable for us to look at a number of items, including, and one that I want your answer on, and I know we have limited time, Mr. Weiss supposedly had this ability to bring a prosecution.
I want to know your feelings on a convention of states. That's what I'm curious, Dee.
Have the right to look into the fact that political appointees in California and in the District of Columbia refused to, in fact, cooperate with him in those investigation that he was charged with doing in Delaware, but which flowed over into their jurisdictions. Isn't that, in fact, an example where those political appointees of the now president, that their decision not to cooperate with him creates at least an appearance of political interference with the investigation of the president's son and possibly activities related to the president?
Appearance of impropriety.
I'm happy to answer this question in hypothetical, but not in the specifics, because I have stayed out of this matter. In the hypothetical, it is the normal process of the department that if a U.S. attorney in one district wants to bring a case in another, they go to that other district and consult. It's perfectly appropriate. They do that in order to determine what the policies are in that district, what the practices have been in that district, what the judges are like in that district. But a U.S. attorney in another district does not have the authority to deny another U.S. attorney the ability to go forward, and I have assured Mr. Weiss that he would have the authority one way or the other, and I think Mr. Weiss's letters completely reflect that.
He's real nervous.
Thank you. To be continued.
Time the gentleman has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California for 5 minutes.
He's real nervous.
Welcome, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you for leading the department with such integrity. We meet today at a momentous time in our history. The country is about to go through a great trial. By this, I do not mean any of the several trials of the former president, but rather
the pencil neck, oh shit.
Committed to the rule of law and that no one is above the law. It is a proposition well known around the world because it is the one essential ingredient in all democracies. We have all professed our belief in this principle, but it has never been truly tested, not like it is today. In this committee, we are engaged in a portion of that trial. The chairman would abuse the power of this committee by trying to interfere in the prosecutions of Donald Trump, by trying to use the committee's power of subpoena to compel criminal discovery, in effect, making the committee a kind of criminal defense firm for the former president. In doing so, the chairman of this committee would establish a very different proposition. Through Mr. Jordan's actions, he would establish the principle that the rule of law should apply to almost everyone, just not the leader of his party. According to this alternate proposition, if you are the president of the United States and you lose your re-election, you can violate the law and Constitution to try to stay in power, and if you are successful, well then maybe you get to be president for life. And if you fail, there is no repercussion. This proposition is also well known to the world, and it is called dictatorship. Mr. Jordan hopes to camouflage his...
Stop talking about dictatorship. Yeah, but what about term limits and things like that that are never going to get done otherwise?
...beneficiary. It is a claim as transparently political as it is devoid of any factual basis. And it is cynical, based on the belief that the American people cannot discern fact from fiction. But I am betting on America. History has shown that those who bet against her are rarely successful, and more often, they end up covered with shame. I believe in the rule of law, and I thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for defending it. Let me now turn to some of the false claims asserted by the former president and some on this committee. On Sunday, the former president appeared on a national news Sunday program and was asked about 4 indictments and 91 counts facing him. His response was, Biden indictments. Excuse me, Biden political indictments.
That's right.
He said to the Attorney General, indict him. Mr. Attorney General, I want to give you a chance to respond. Was the president telling the truth, or was he lying when he said that President Biden told you to indict him?
No one has told me to indict, and in this case, the decision to indict was made by the special counsel.
So that statement the president made on Sunday was false?
I'm just going to say again that no one has told me we should be indicted.
Joe Biden would never order anyone to be prosecuted as totally independent.
Let me ask you this question about the prosecution of Hunter Biden. The prosecutor in that case, Mr. Weiss, was appointed not by
Trump.
Joe Biden, but he was appointed in the first instance by Donald Trump. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and he was approved by 2 Democratic senators, had to be.
Continued in that position, yes.
And Mr. Attorney General, can you imagine the hue and cry you would hear from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle if you had removed him from that position? Can you imagine the claims that you had removed a prosecutor who was diligently investigating Hunter Biden? Can you imagine
the hypothetical?
The outrage they would have expressed?
I can say that during my confirmation hearing, I discussed with many senators on that side of the aisle.
Sounds like a goat.
Desire and actual insistence that Mr. Weiss be continued to have responsibility for that matter. And I promised, and I said at my confirmation hearing, that he would be permitted to stay and that I would not interfere.
And Mr. Attorney General, that was exactly the right decision. That was the right decision to give the American people the confidence that even a prosecutor chosen by the former president would continue in the investigation into the son of the current president. That was exactly the right decision. Exactly the right decision, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would have been screaming if it were otherwise.
You're scared.
But their attack on you is completely devoid of fact, of principle.
You're scared.
But I appreciate you doing the right thing for the Department of Justice, and more importantly, the right thing for the American people.
You're going to burn in hell.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Attorney General Garland, Elon Musk was a Democrat who admittedly supported Biden, but then he became a critic of the administration and exposed the censorship regime. Now, per public reports, the DOJ has opened not 1 but 2 investigations of Elon Musk. Mark Zuckerberg, on the other hand, spent $400 million in 2020 tilting the elections secretly for Democrats. No investigations whatsoever. To the American public, these look like mafia tactics. You pays your money, we look the other way. You get in our way, we punish you. The American public sees what these tactics are. Now I want to direct your attention to a video here.
Video? I like video. Show and tell.
Obviously, that's a significant matter. It is an ongoing criminal investigation, and so I'm not going to comment on an ongoing criminal investigation.
Were those pipe bombs operable?
Again,
the ATF is the expert.
Again, it's an ongoing criminal investigation, and under long-standing policy, I cannot comment.
As you know, this is a very active, ongoing investigation, and there are some restrictions on that, but we will
Yes,
do
we
our
can
best to
handle
move on.
classified information, and we fund your department, and so you need to provide that.
It's not, respectfully, it's not an issue of classification. It's an issue of commenting on ongoing criminal investigations, which is something that by longstanding department policy, we are
We've been
restricted
able
in
to
doing. And in
dodge
fact, the last
questions.
administration actually strengthened those policies, partly
That's
because—
not our policy, though, and we fund you, so let's move on. Do you know how?
So I'm not going to violate this norm of the rule of law. I'm not going to comment on an investigation that's ongoing.
Pattern here.
Peter Navarro was indicted for contempt of Congress. Aren't you, in fact, in contempt of Congress when you give us this answer? This is an answer that's appropriate at a press conference. It's not an answer that's appropriate when we are asking questions. We are the committee that is responsible for your creation, for your existence of your department. You cannot continue to give us these answers. Aren't you, in fact, in contempt of Congress when you refuse to answer?
Congressman, I have the greatest respect for Congress. I also have the greatest respect for the Constitution and laws of the United States.
Yes.
The protection of pending investigations and ongoing investigations, as I briefly discussed in another dialogue a few moments ago, goes back to the separation of powers, which gives to the executive branch the sole authority to conduct prosecutions. It's a requirement of due process and respect for
They
those
have
who are under
oversight.
investigation, the protection of their civil rights. This
Well,
has
with
nothing
with
to
all
do
due with all due
for
respect,
Congress.
with all due respect to that, Iran-Contra was an ongoing investigation, and that didn't stop Congress from getting the answers. And you're getting in the way of our constitutional duty. You're citing the Constitution. I'm going to cite it. It's our constitutional duty to do oversight.
Yes, it is.
Now, in that video, that was your answer to a question to me 2 years ago when I said how many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol and how many went into the Capitol. Can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, last time, you don't know how many there were or there were none?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions.
I don't
If there
know.
were any, I don't know how many. I don't know whether there are any.
Don't you think they should have known by now?
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you
Uh-oh.
don't know that there were any. You want to say that again, that you don't know that there were
I have
any?
no personal knowledge of this matter. I think what I said the last time.
You've had 2 years to find out. And the day, by the way, that was in reference to Ray Epps, and yesterday you indicted him. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? On a misdemeanor. Meanwhile, you're sending grandmas to prison. You're putting people away for 20 years
That's
for
right.
merely filming. Some people weren't even there yet. You got the guy on video who's saying go into the Capitol. He's directing people to the Capitol before the speech ends. He's at the site of the first breach. You've got all the goods on him, 10 videos, and it's an indictment for a misdemeanor? The American
It's a
public
joke.
isn't buying it.
It's a
I yield
joke.
the balance of my time to Chairman Jordan.
May I answer the
Yeah, and
question?
you're probably right about the mafia.
I'm going to ask you one now. We'll let the gentleman.
Yeah.
I need to
Go
go
ahead,
put on
but
some Joe, brother.
In discovery, in the cases that were filed with respect to January 6, the Justice Department prosecutors provided whatever information they had about the question that you're asking. With respect to Mr. Epps, the FBI has said that he was not an employee or informant of the FBI. Mr. Epps has been charged, and there's a proceeding, I believe, going on today on that subject.
The charge is a joke. I yield to the chairman.
The time the gentleman has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Attorney General, my colleague just said that you should be held in contempt of Congress, and that is quite rich, because the guy who's leaving the hearing room right now, Mr. Jordan, is about 500 days into evading his subpoena, about 500 days. So if we're going to talk about contempt of Congress, let's get real. I mean, are you serious that Jim Jordan, a witness to one of the greatest crimes ever committed in America, a crime where more prosecutions have occurred than any crime committed in America, refuses to help his country, and we're going to get lectured about subpoena compliance and contempt of Congress? Jim Jordan won't even honor a lawful subpoena? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There's no credibility on that side. Mr. Attorney General, you are serious, they are not. You are decent, they are not. You are fair, they are not. So I welcome you to the law firm of Insurrection LLP, where they work every single day on behalf of one client, Donald Trump. And they do that at the expense of millions of Americans who need the government to stay open, who want their kids safe in their schools, and would like to see Ukraine stay in the fight so that we don't help Russia. That's the expense that this nonsense, this clown show, I'd call it a clown show, except they actually have real responsibilities that affect real Americans. It's the difference between one side that believes in governing and one side that believes in ruling. You've tried to comply with this committee. In fact, last week, one of your special agents came here for an interview, brought his lawyer, and was nonsense.
This guy is a mute.
Except they actually have real responsibilities that affect real.
This guy is such a chucklehead, no talent, ass clown, sellout. Oh my God. Sorry, put it
Was
back
brought.
on.
Are you familiar with that standoff that occurred last week, Mr. Attorney General?
Generally, yes.
Well, your office also sent a letter detailing it, that you were willing to comply, but you'd like him to have a lawyer, and I'd like to submit that to the record with unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Who appointed Mr. Weiss?
Mr. Trump was the last person who appointed Mr. Weiss to the position of U.S. Attorney. I appointed him to the position of Special Counsel last month.
Who initially appointed John Durham?
Mr. Durham was, I believe, also appointed by President Trump, and Mr. Barr appointed him as Special Counsel.
And again, these guys are so upset that Donald Trump's appointed prosecutors aren't doing enough of the corruption that Donald Trump wants them to do. So either they are just following the law, or they're not as corrupt, and they're not willing to go as far as they think that Donald Trump deserves. That's what they're asking to happen here. Also, doesn't it seem that they want it both ways when it comes to the special counsel? A lot of questions suggested that the special counsel should be independent, but when they didn't like the direction of the special counsel, you were asked why you didn't interfere more or involve yourself more or investigate more. Did you get that sense that you're kind of stuck here?
When I make an appointment, somebody be special counsel or prosecutor, the appointment is without respect to what the outcomes of the case will be.
Your office has made a number of reforms to 702, targeting foreign nationals, but those reforms have not been put into law. 702 is also one of the best weapons we have to go after fentanyl. Can you tell us if you would support putting some of those reforms into law so we don't have to live administration to administration to see if they're going to be followed?
I would. Section 702 provides us with the greatest amount, at least the Justice Department, every morning, the greatest amount of intelligence that we receive about dangerous threats to the United States.
From foreign nationals?
From foreign nationals. I am quite aware and sensitive to civil liberties concerns with respect to the queries. And for that reason, I put into place and I extended some of those that Mr. Barr had begun at the end of his term, and I put further ones in place. Those have led to a dramatic reduction in the number of queries and a dramatic reduction in the number of non-compliant queries. I believe those are appropriate reforms, and I would be in favor of codifying them, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you for coming and doing something that the chairman is unwilling to do, testify to Congress. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Attorney General, on August 11, 2023, you appointed Mr. David Weiss, U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware, as special counsel to oversee the investigation of Hunter Biden. I don't think the question has been asked yet. Why did you choose to appoint him as special counsel?
The explanation was given, and as far and to the extent I can give I'm permitted to give an explanation, is the one I gave and sent to the Congress, which is that Mr. Weiss requested it, that I had promised to give him all the resources that he need, that he had reached the stage of the investigation where he thought it would be appropriate. And under those extraordinary circumstances, I thought the public interest would be served by making him special counsel.
How did Mr. Weiss's name emerge? Who recommended him? How was it brought to you or presented to you that this would be the best person to be the special counsel?
No, I'm not going to get into internal discussions. Mr. Weiss asked that he be appointed as special counsel, and I granted that request and made him special counsel, but I'm not going to get into internal deliberations in the Justice Department.
But I think you said earlier you've had no discussions with the White House and certainly the president in regards to that. Is that accurate?
Of course.
There were no suggestions that came from any other level of government on Mr.
Nothing came from the White House, that's right.
So on August 20th, 2023, the Washington Post article claimed that Mr. Weiss worked with Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden's late brother, Beau Biden. Were you aware that there was a relationship there with the Biden family?
I'm not familiar with this. I don't know when he did what.
They worked together on legal cases in prior years. You were unaware of this?
I'm not familiar with that.
And the article claims it would have been inevitable for Mr. Weiss and the president to cross paths in a state like Delaware. They knew each other. There was a relationship there, but you were unaware of any of this before you appointed him?
I'm unaware of this, but attorneys who are in practice certainly get to know people. It's very difficult anywhere in the country for attorneys not to get to know attorneys on other sides of matters.
You said previously that Mr. Weiss had the ultimate authority over the investigation of the president's son, including prior to his appointment as special counsel. And you stand by that statement, I'm sure?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Just that in fact, there was that the ultimate authority was still there with Mr. Weiss to make determinations on that case.
You mean still as special counsel? Yes.
Yes, as special counsel. So the buck stopped there, and that's been determined. According to whistleblower testimony, Mr. Weiss deputy AUSA Leslie Wolf objected to search warrants of President Biden's guest house, denied investigation access to a storage unit containing all the documents from the vacated office of law firm. Is Leslie Wolf still employed by the Department of Justice?
I'm not going to talk about any individuals in the Justice Department. As I said before, singling out individuals has led to serious threats to their safety. I will say that the supervisor of this investigation was Mr. Weiss. He's responsible for all the decisions that were made. Excuse me. Many of the things that you're saying occurred during the previous administration. I apologize.
Okay. Well, there was absolutely a discussion by Leslie Wolf that if they told investigators or got involved with this, that there would ultimately be issues. You still believe that at this point that the entire investigation has moved in the correct discretion, was handled by the correct discretion of the individuals involved?
Mr. Weiss was a long-standing career prosecutor who was appointed by President Trump. He has an outstanding reputation. And I have confidence that he will proceed as appropriate. And at the end of his investigation, he will submit a public report, just like Mr. Durham, just like Mr. Mueller. He will be available for you to ask him questions about why he did various things that were done.
I yield the balance of my time to the chairman.
Mr. Garland, what changed? On July 10th, 2023, David Weiss wrote Senator Graham and said, I have not requested special counsel designation. August 11th, you announced that he's now the special counsel. What happened in that 31 days?
As I said publicly, several days before my announcement, I think 3 days, Mr. Weiss had asked to become special counsel. He explained that he had reached the stage of his investigation where he thought that appropriate.
What stage is that?
I had promised to give him the resources he needed.
What stage is that? He'd reached the stage. After 5 years, what stage are we in? We in the beginning stage, the middle stage, the end stage, the keep hiding the ball stage? What stage are we in?
I think this one I would go back to the videotape where I said I'm not permitted to discuss ongoing investigations.
Well, isn't that convenient? Something changed in 31 to 32 days from July 10th to August 11th. I think it's too brave. Whistleblowers came forward and a judge called BS on the plea deal. You guys tried to get past them. That's what I think happened. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The House Judiciary Committee has the responsibility of helping to ensure the rule of law. Unfortunately, this committee's chairman ignored a bipartisan congressional subpoena. The horrible precedent set by this chairman has damaged the credibility of all congressional committees in seeking information from witnesses and damaged the rule of law. Attorney General Garland, thank you for your public service and thank you for being here today. I'd like to start by showing a video of January 6th.
Oh, isa mi salud.
That day.
Hey, brother, we're boots on the ground here. We're moving on to Capitol now. I'll give you a boots on the ground update here in a few.
Multiple capital entries. Multiple capital entries. We're still taking metal, sharpened objects, missiles to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks. This is now effectively a riot.
1349 hours declaring it a riot.
Attorney General Garland, the Department of Justice charged over 1,100 defendants in connection with the attack on our Capitol, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm going to state two facts. The people who showed up on January 6th to attack the nation's Capitol were supporters of Donald Trump. They attacked the Capitol to stop Congress from certifying the fact that Donald Trump lost the election. Those two facts were so horrible that some in the right-wing media and some Republican members of Congress could not handle that, so they made.
I'm sorry, is this a January 6th hearing?
People who showed up. You said the people who showed up had love in their hearts. The Republican member of Congress said January 6th was like a normal tourist visit, and some Republicans have said there were no weapons used on January 6th. Attorney General Garland, were there weapons used in the attack on January 6th?
Yeah, yes, in the video you already saw some of the weapons that were used, and there are obviously many more, many hours of video.
Another conspiracy theory is that somehow the FBI actually orchestrated this attack. So I'm going to go through some cases that have gone through completion and resulted in sentencing. Joe Biggs was sentenced to 17 years in prison for seditious conspiracy and other counts related to attack on our nation's Capitol. Have you seen any shred of evidence that Joe Biggs was an FBI agent?
No.
In fact, Joe Biggs was a member of the Proud Boys. This is what Assistant U.S. Attorney Connor Monroe stated about Joe Biggs and the Proud Boys in court. He stated, quote, "They saw themselves as Donald Trump's army, fighting to keep their preferred leader in power no matter what the law or the courts had to say about it." And on September 4th, Joe Biggs stated that he is confident Trump will pardon him. He said, quote, "Oh, I know he'll pardon us. We're his supporters. We went there like he asked." I'd like to now ask you about the case of Stuart Rhodes, who was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the attack on our nation's Capitol. Have you seen any shred of evidence that Stuart Rhodes was an FBI agent?
No.
In fact, he was the founder on
September
4th of a far-right paramilitary organization. Rhodes asked Donald Trump to call them up as militia. And then I'd like to ask you about Enrique Tarrio, who was sentenced to 22 years in the attack on our nation's Capitol. Have you seen any evidence that Enrique Tarrio was an FBI agent?
He was not an FBI agent.
In fact, he was the leader of the Proud Boys. What happened on January 6th is that Donald Trump's supporters showed up because he told them to. They marched to the Capitol because he told them to. They attacked the Capitol because he told them to stop the steal. That is the truth, and that is how history is going to record it. Thank you for prosecuting those who attacked our nation's Capitol. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a slide up here, and I'll start. In October or March of 22, Mr. Weiss was denied the ability to bring charges against Hunter Biden in the District of Columbia. In April of that same year, you testified before the Senate Appropriations Committee that Mr. Weiss was free to run the investigation without interference from the DOJ. According to the IRS whistleblower, there was a meeting in October of 22 where Mr. Weiss said that he was not the deciding official on whether charges were filed. And we know that because we have handwritten notes from the IRS whistleblowers that was confirmed in an email to people in the meeting. Later in January, Mr. Weiss was denied the ability to bring charges again against Hunter Biden in the Central District of California. You testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee in March of this year that he had full authority. That Weiss confirmed that to us in a letter in June, that he had been granted, quote, full authority over this matter. But then he kind of backed up. In June 30th, he said, well, just kidding. My charging authority is geographically limited to my home district in Delaware. And of course, you appoint him as special counsel. So why the heck has his story changed so many times over the course of these investigations?
Congressman, I've seen all of the 3 letters. I've read them quite carefully. They are all consistent with each other, and I urge everyone watching this on television or anyone who's interested to look at those 3 letters. They are not inconsistent with each other, and there's no change in the story.
So, but you agree that he had, and you've said this publicly, that he had ultimate authority prior to the appointment of special counsel.
I've explained this repeatedly here. I've explained this in another proceeding. I said that Mr. Weiss would have the authority to bring a case in any jurisdiction in which he wanted to, and Mr. Weiss has confirmed that he would have that authority. I explained that if he had to bring a case in another jurisdiction, as a matter of mechanics, it would require me me or a delegatee of mine to sign a 515 order. That is very common.
But Mr. Attorney General,
and there was nothing stopping that from happening.
Forgive me for a second, though, but when you say you have ultimate, when he wrote a letter on your behalf in June, I have ultimate authority. This is prior to the designation of special counsel. Ultimate to me means like that you can go wherever you want to.
Ultimate means
at that particular point, sir, could he file charges in the District of South Carolina? He would not have that ability, correct? He would have to go through that U.S. attorney. So that's not full authority.
All he would have to do is ask me for 515 authority, and I would sign it right away, just like when he asked me to be special counsel. Within 3 days, I signed that.
So he didn't have ultimate authority.
He had the authority because I promised that he would have the authority.
But he did not have that authority. See, here's where I'm going. If he was denied the ability to bring charges in March of 22, in the District of Columbia, if he was denied the ability to bring charges in January of 23 in the Central District of California, that's not full authority. These U.S. attorneys operate as gatekeepers, so that's not full authority to do much of anything. And you know what's remarkable to me? We sit here and we look at this, and his story has changed so many times. You know whose story hasn't changed? Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler. The emails that confirm that he said, I'm not the deciding person on whether charges are filed. And you know what the response back was from his colleague at work? Yep, you covered it all, Gary. That is consistent. What Mr. Weiss has done is this shell game and saying that he has authority, he doesn't have authority, but these gatekeepers at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia and in the Central District of California, they would have the gatekeeping authority on whether charges are brought in their jurisdictions.
I'm sorry,
absent that designation, correct?
Those words have no meaning, gatekeepers, et cetera. Mr. Weiss said he was never denied authority. I'm the one with the authority to decide who can prosecute in a different jurisdiction, and I promised that he would have that authority. I do not see any inconsistency here. I was not at the meeting that Mr. Shapley was referring to. I know what I guaranteed, and I know what Mr. Weiss has said I guaranteed.
Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time.
It's a simple question. If he already had it, why does he need it? That's the question. You said in your statement on August 11th, you said he will continue to have the authority to bring charges where, when, and wherever he decides. So how can he continue to have a power that you just gave him? That's the fundamental question the gentleman from South Carolina was asking. If he already had it, why does he need it?
And I tried to answer that he had the authority and he continued to have
When
the
did he
authority.
specifically ask you, did you tell him ahead of time that he could get 515 status anytime? When did you tell him that he could get that if he requested it?
I made absolutely clear.
No, when? Did you tell him at the start of the
I made
investigation?
clear from the beginning in my statements to the Senate that he would have the authority to make any decisions that he wanted to and bring prosecutions he thought were appropriate.
The gentleman from South Carolina has expired. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Garland, thank you for your tremendous service to this country. As somebody who was trapped in the gallery on January 6th, I have to admit it's still hard for me to look at that video and imagine that that happened at our U.S. Capitol. And I'm deeply grateful that you have led this nation towards accountability of all those who were involved, including the former president. You have done so with full and complete attention to the facts, with a team around you that focuses on thorough investigation, and with a very clear mission that you've stated over and over and over again, despite the asked and answered on the other side, that the Justice Department works for the American people. This is a night and day transformation from a Justice Department that was constantly used by Donald Trump for his own political gain. And it is my firm belief that we have to hold those accountable who tried to destroy our country, including the former president, or we risk losing our country altogether. So I thank you for your steadfast leadership. It is just sad that this committee has also been transformed into a soapbox for political conspiracy theorists, instead of focusing on the really important issues that the American people care about. And so that's what I'm gonna try to do. I'm gonna focus on the critical crisis of reproductive freedom and the efforts to try and strip reproductive freedom from people across this country. As you know, a decades-long project of the extreme right wing materialized last year when 5 Republican-appointed justices overturned 50 years of precedent that established the constitutional right to abortion. As one of the 1 in 4 women across this country who has had an abortion and who felt compelled to share my story after decades because I saw the attacks on the right to abortion and what it would do particularly for poor women, for Black and brown and indigenous people across this country, I spoke out and shared that story. In the 22 states where Republicans control the state legislature and governorship today, all have moved to restrict reproductive rights. More than 25 million women of childbearing age now live in states where abortion access has been curtailed. And in Washington state, my home state, the Seattle Times reported that we are seeing increasing numbers of abortion patients, not only from neighboring Idaho, which we knew we would see, but also from other southern states where these restrictions are enforced. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter this Seattle Times article into the record. She traveled 2,000 miles secretly for her Washington abortion. Why patients from the South are coming here.
Without objection.
As our fundamental freedoms are threatened by extreme MAGA Republicans in Congress and across the country, we trust that the DOJ will initiate investigations and file lawsuits to protect reproductive rights. With respect to mifepristone, what has the department done to protect access to this very safe abortion drug that women can take at home safely and to end a pregnancy?
So the FDA authorized the use of mifepristone as safe and effective, and it did it back in 2000. That's been challenged, first in a district court when we defended the FDA in that matter. There was an appeal to the circuit court, which narrowed the district court's opinion in some ways, but allowed it to go forward in other. We have filed a cert petition, which has been granted, I think, in the Supreme Court of the United States.
Very, very important work. Thank you. My home state of Washington has one of the highest rates of religiously affiliated hospitals in the country, with our state's insurance commissioner's office reporting that in 2021, there were several counties lacking even one secular hospital. This is an issue under the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act when patients in need of abortion care as a life-saving treatment are denied services under the hospital's policies. What is the department doing to enforce this law mandating that every hospital that receives Medicare funds provide, quote, necessary stabilizing treatment to patients, including abortion care?
You're right, this is a federal law. It expressly preempts any inconsistent state law. For that reason, we filed a lawsuit in Idaho and one in the district court with respect to an Idaho law that impinged on the rights granted under EMTALA. We have filed, I think, a number of statements of interest in other places, and we're continuing to look at where it would be appropriate to intervene.
Thank you. You're on record stating that women who reside in states that have banned access to comprehensive reproductive care must remain free to seek that care in states where it is legal. I thank you for that. Can you briefly discuss the progress made by the task force and DOJ to ensure that pregnant people retain their right to travel?
Yes, look, my view about this right to travel is the same as Justice Kavanaugh's in his separate opinion. He said, this is not a particularly difficult question. The right to travel is a constitutional right, and it allows a woman in a state that bars abortion to travel and obtain an abortion in a state in which it's permitted.
Thank you, Attorney General, for your commitment to this issue and to upholding the rule of law in our country. Appreciate your service.
Time and delay has expired. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for being here today. I would like to go back briefly to your remarks regarding before the Senate when you were confirmed and your promise regarding Mr. Weiss. Can you explain to us in a little more detail who you promised that you would keep Mr. Weiss on this case? To whom was that promise made?
Yeah, so a number of senators in my meetings with them asked me to make that promise. I think that was discussed in my interchange with a senator from Tennessee, I believe.
And did that promise that you made lead you to believe that even if that Mr. Weiss displayed a level of incompetence, that you would be precluded from asking him to step down or precluded from replacing him?
Look, when someone asks me to make this appointment, they didn't ask me depending upon what the outcome was. Mr. Weiss has made his appointment, decisions, and Mr. Weiss is an experienced federal prosecutor with extensive experience and with sufficient credibility to be appointed by President Trump. I just have no grounds for interfering here.
Right, so you haven't answered the question. The question was really what level of incompetence displayed by a prosecutor under your control would it take for you to make a change? But let's move on. The level of incompetence I'm referring to, I'll just read this to you. This is the same Weiss who headed an investigation that was trashed by whistleblowers who alleged that his investigation had been fixed from the outset. It's the same Weiss who ran an investigation in which agents were allegedly prevented from asking about Joe Biden, obstructed in their efforts to pursue questions, compromised by tip-offs to the Biden team on planned searches. It was the same Weiss who reportedly allowed the statute of limitations to run out on Hunter's major tax offenses, even though he had the option to extend it. It was the same Weiss who did not indict on major tax felonies and cut a plea deal that brushed aside a felony gun charge. It was the same Weiss who inked a widely panned sweetheart deal that caused a federal judge to balk at and trash a sweeping immunity grant, language that even the prosecutor admitted had never been seen in a previous plea deal. So there's a list of what I would suggest under many people's definition would be incompetence. Are you saying that that's inadequate for you to have questioned what he was doing?
I'm saying that all of these are allegations. I don't know what the facts of them are.
You don't. You run the fucking
as I've
department.
Explained, stayed out of this investigation. I was not present at any of the meetings discussed.
How convenient.
Some of the meetings occurred under the previous administration, where Mr. Weiss was assigned to the matter by the previous Justice Department, and I'm not in a position to comment on them.
That's too bad. Is that there's a scope of investigation memo generally issued when we start these things out. Who issued that scope of investigation memo to Mr. Weiss? Was it done back on when he was originally appointed to take on the Biden case? Is that when the memo was telling him what he was supposed to do was issued? Is there a scope of investigation memo is my question.
There's a scope of investigation with respect to special counsel, and that has been publicly transmitted to the chairman of this Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee.
And who wrote it?
Who wrote that scope?
Yeah. Who decided what should be within the scope of that investigation?
I'm sorry?
Who wrote the memo? Who decided what the scope of that
I decided what should be in the scope. If you'll compare that to the scope of many other special counsels, it basically is modeled on the format that we've used in the past, not only in this administration, but the previous one.
In your remarks delivered on August 11th of this year concerning the appointment of David Weiss as special counsel, you say, upon considering his request, as well as, quote, the extraordinary circumstances relating to this matter, end quote. Can you tell us what those extraordinary circumstances were?
I'm sorry.
Okay, so these are your remarks back on August 11th.
Yes.
And it says, on Tuesday of this week, Mr. Weiss advised me that, I'm just quoting from your memo, this is what he said.
Yes.
In his judgment, his investigation has reached a stage at which he should continue his work as special counsel, and he asked to be so appointed. Upon considering his request, as well as, quote, the extraordinary circumstances related to this matter, end quote, I've concluded it's in the best public interest to appoint him special counsel. What were those extraordinary circumstances you're talking about?
Yeah, look, all of these special counsels, including the appointment by Mr. Barr with respect to Mr. Durham, uses those phrases. The reason he uses those phrases is because that's in the special counsel regulation. I've said as much as I can say with respect to that without discussing matters relating to a pending investigation. I can't discuss matters with respect to a pending investigation for the reasons I've said.
Thank you. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garland, I want to welcome you today to this hearing. Want to turn our attention to something very interesting, more important. The most important thing on Main Street today in my district is drug addiction, narcotics, trafficking, fentanyl. I'm going to quote.
I'm so tired of listening to these people talk about fentanyl, for shit's sake, man, when their border's wide open. This is all disingenuous shit. Okay, you're going, oh, look at the fentanyl over here. But not all the fentanyl pouring across the border? There's no wall? Come on.
Sale of fentanyl from start to finish. Mr. Garland, I believe that the only thing that cartel leaders fear is a United States prison. I want to thank you for the good job. You recently extradited Oviedo Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's son. Thank you very much for that good job. My question is...
Right, and then the next guy filled in and took over. And did the drugs stop when El Chapo's son was put in prison? No.
To face U.S. justice and a U.S. prison sentence.
Yeah, I don't want to get into discussions, diplomatic discussions over the matter, but obviously we have indicted the other Chapitos, Chapito being the nickname given to the sons of El Chapo.
How many of those? How many are there of those?
Trying to remember, I think there are maybe 4 more, maybe 5, I'm not sure exactly. But they've all been publicly indicted, and of course we will seek the extradition of it and the apprehension of everyone we've indicted.
The apprehension, the indictment of these individuals requires that you have cooperation from foreign countries, especially Mexico, since that's where a lot of these cartels are operating. Would you say right now Mexico?
I could give 2 rats' asses whether El Chapo's son is in jail. Did the drug stop? It's bullshit. It's a feather in their cap. That's all.
His apprehension by the Mexicans led to the deaths of a significant number of Mexican Marines. Ovidio's people fighting back with 50 caliber machine guns, and the Marines having to use Black Hawk attack helicopters in order to arrest him.
Are these U.S. Marines or Mexican?
I'm sorry?
Marines? United States Marines?
No, I'm sorry, Mexican Marines. It's the Mexican Marines who are playing an important role in the apprehension of the cartel leaders.
So, Mr. Garland, would you characterize cooperation right now with Mexicans as being good, not good?
I would say cooperation can always be better.
Well, it's a political
we have an
answer.
enormous problem with respect to fentanyl coming from Mexico, from its manufacture there, based on the precursors coming from China, based on the cartel leaders.
How can we as members of Congress help you make sure that other countries have stronger cooperating relationship with us? How can we make sure that they cooperate to their fullest abilities with you?
I appreciate that request. I'll have to think about it some more. I will say that I personally traveled to Mexico twice to try to get cooperation with respect to these matters.
How important is FISA and 702 to your job when it comes to fighting narco fentanyl?
It's very important. Fentanyl poses a national security problem for the United States.
So can you work with us to assure that we put guardrails put guardrails, safety measures on 702 to assure that those investigative weapons are not turned against U.S. citizens?
Absolutely. 702 is a crucial, essential tool, but like all tools, it has to be properly controlled. And we would be happy to work with Congress to make sure the civil liberties are protected.
My last minute, I wanted to turn to the antitrust area, the European Union, and the Digital Marketing Act, which is Digital Markets Act, which is designed to protect consumers in Europe. Yet, it looks like most of their focus is on American firms. No European companies or other foreign operators in the European Union are being targeted. It looks like it's only American firms operating in Europe. And it looks like the DOJ is working to support the efforts of the Europeans in implementing the Digital Marketing Act. I have 18 seconds. I'm going to submit a written question to your office, but my focus, my interest is making sure American jobs, American companies are successful around the globe and that they are not in any way hampered from working overseas. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I ran out of time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 5 minutes. Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Attorney General. You know, following your confirmation, Americans were promised they were getting a focused, nonpartisan to lead their federal law enforcement. I had my doubts back then. And the last 2 years have more than confirmed in my mind those fears. Never in my life would I have thought that I would see such a politicized DOJ. Never in my life would I have thought I would see such a Department of Justice that didn't obey their own rules. Never in my life did I think I would see the egregious investigations conducted under your watch, or the blatant disregard of the First Amendment by FBI field officers under your watch. And never in my life did I think I would see our great DOJ turn into a politicized weapon to be wielded by an investigation to attack political rivals. I still hold the thousands of hardworking staff with high regard, but unfortunately there are some within the department, in my mind, who have betrayed their oaths. And for that, you must be held accountable. I hold you accountable for the labeling of parents as domestic terrorists standing up for their proper education of their own children. I hold you accountable for the anti-Catholic memo. Imagine sending agents undercover into Roman Catholic churches because they were supposedly domestic terrorists. And I hold you accountable for unleashing a special counsel with a history of botched investigations on our current president's political rival. The department under your leadership, I am sorry to say, has become an enforcement arm of the Democratic National Committee. If there is a perceived threat to the Democratic Party, this DOJ attacks every single time. But when there are actionable threats against conservatives, this DOJ stays put. Violent protesters outside the Supreme Court justice's home, unpunished. Attacks on pro-life centers, unpunished. The two-tiered system of justice is clear, and it's clear to the American public. And the buck stops with the man in charge. That man is you. The actions of the DOJ are on you. The decline of Americans' trust in our federal law enforcement is on you. The political weaponization of the DOJ is on you. Attorney General, I need a simple yes or no to the following, just yes or no, because we don't have much time. Do you agree that traditional Catholics are violent extremists? Yes or no?
Let me answer what you've said in that long list of statements, and
I
I'll be
control
happy to answer all of those.
Attorney
But let me
General, I
just-
control the time. I'm going to ask you to answer the questions I
You
asked.
controlled time by asking me a substantial number of things. And let
I
me
didn't
give-
ask you those things. I
will
made a
answer
statement.
I
Attorney
will-
General, through the chair, I ask you, do you agree that traditional Catholics are violent extremists? Answer
I have
the
no
question.
idea what the traditional means here. The
Catholics,
let me
Catholics
just,
that
can
go
I
to
answer
church.
May I answer your question?
Yes
the
or no?
idea that someone with my family background would discriminate against any religion is so outrageous, so absurd.
Mr. Attorney
It's hard to
General, it
even
was your
answer
FBI
question.
that did this. It was your FBI that was sending, and we have the memos, we have the emails, we're sending undercover agents into Catholic churches.
Both I and the director
This
of
is
the FBI
the
have said that we
director of
were
the FBI.
appalled by that memo.
So then you agree that they're not extremists?
We were appalled by that memo.
Are they extremists or not, Attorney General?
I think that
Are they extremists or not, Attorney General?
everything in that memo is
Are they
appalling.
extremists or not? I'm asking a simple question. Say no if you think that was wrong.
Catholics are not extremists. No.
Was anyone fired for drafting and circulating the anti-Catholic memo?
You have in front of you the inspection division's investigation.
Just tell me yes or no, please.
I don't know.
We have
the
no
answer.
time.
I don't know the answer to that. There's
Okay.
a
Do you agree that
disciplinary
parents attending
process
school
that the
board
Attorney
meetings should be
General is not
categorized?
permitted
Should
to
parents
intervene
that,
in.
should parents that go to school board meetings and are very vocal about their kids' education, should they be classified as domestic terrorists?
Of course not, and my memo made clear that vigorous objections to policies in schools are protected
So it's no.
by the First Amendment.
The president this week accused you, not the president himself, his staff, and it was in the Wall Street Journal, and it was leaked out, of mismanaging the Hunter Biden probe. Do you agree? Yes or no? It was in the Wall Street Journal article. I'm not saying
I'm
that.
sorry. Do I agree with the Wall Street Journal?
Yes, and that the information they released that said you botched this probe.
Yeah, I think I've dealt with the Hunter Biden investigation in the way I've told this.
Mr. Chairman, I yield my remaining time to you.
I appreciate it. The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General Garland, for your decades of service to the Department of Justice, to our country, and to our Constitution. It's been truly honorable service, and I think the American public as a whole recognizes that. I was struck by and appreciate your opening statement in which you made crystal clear your fidelity to the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law, and your reaffirmation that the Attorney General is not the president's lawyer. This is a welcome change from the rhetoric and actions of some of your predecessors in the last administration when they appeared before us. As we all should know, the Justice Department works for the American people to prosecute crimes, uphold the rule of law and Americans' individual rights, and keep our country safe. And Congress, of course, has a legitimate duty of oversight. But the blatantly political and misleading rhetoric which we've been subjected to today undermines the seriousness of this committee's work and ultimately the legitimacy and core values of our American institutions. It's painfully obvious to anyone who cares about our Constitution that our colleagues have called this hearing not to conduct legitimate oversight, but to once again defend the indefensible actions of the disgraced, twice impeached, and now repeatedly indicted in multiple jurisdictions former president, and to distract from their inability to perform the most basic function of Congress, to fund the federal government. So they're baselessly accusing the U.S. Department of Justice of bias against the former president and his allies. But it's important to note that those who are noisily and shamelessly trying to subvert our justice system are the same ones who seem to have both the most to fear from those ongoing investigations and the most to gain politically and personally from impeding them. As others have noted, these attempts now include trying to defund the Office of Special Counsel, Jack Smith's office, altogether. I, like so many Americans, find this behavior contemptible and far beneath what we should expect from our country's leaders. Mr. Attorney General, why is it so important for both upholding the rule of law and maintaining public trust that our justice system be able to conduct investigations into wrongdoing free from political interference?
The law, the criminal law can impose incredible sanctions on people. It can take away their liberty. That means due process has to be followed during investigations, and that partisan considerations not play a role. That civil liberties and civil rights are protected, and the only way that can happen is if prosecutors are permitted to go about their work without any external impermissible interventions or considerations.
Thank you.
Hey, Wingnut, what's going on? This stuff is so incredibly stupid. Okay. It's just all about how Trump is awful and how they weaponize the Justice Department and they just want to put this shit back on the track and protect democracy. And it's just like, man, I just want to barf all the time, man.
Congress, in the form of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, authorize the department to bring cases and to enforce the Constitution of the United States with respect to the right to vote. As I'm sure you know, in the Shelby County case, the Supreme Court eliminated one of our tools, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act.
The DOJ is nothing but a political wing of the Democratic Party, wholly owned subsidiary, complete, full bureaucracy, full of a bunch of swamp creatures.
Unconstitutionally impinged on the right to vote. We have supported private parties when they've brought those cases.
We're doing all those things you want, Ms. Progressive. We're jumping through all your hoops.
Task force with respect to threats against election workers, because threatening election workers and stopping them from going about their work.
That's bad.
Right to vote can be impinged. That's just a sampling.
And we certainly saw evidence of that in Pennsylvania during the last presidential election.
Barf.
So we really appreciate all those efforts.
The last presidential election. You have the balls to talk about the last presidential election. 82 million fucking people didn't vote for him, and Fulton County didn't have a flood. Okay? And people don't drop off thousands of ballots into drop boxes because, I don't know, they're OCD.
Chair, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a fact sheet on the Department of Justice's work under Attorney General Garland's leadership to safeguard Americans' right to vote and protect our election officials and workers.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Committee will be in order. Committee will be in order.
Uh-oh, we got a yeller.
Vacillated, please.
Got a protester.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General.
Thank you.
On August 11th, 2023, you appointed Mr. Weiss special counsel. You wrote a letter to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees where you cited extraordinary circumstances requiring the appointment. You avoided answering the question when Mr. Bentz asked you. I'll give you another chance to answer it. What were those extraordinary circumstances?
I'm afraid I'll have to give you the same answer I gave before. I've gave as much as I can give, which is that he thought that he had reached a stage where it would be appropriate, that I had promised him that I would give him any resource that he needed, and that he asked for it. And to go further would go into a pending investigation.
Okay, let's talk about that authority. Back on March 1st, you told the Senate Judiciary Committee that Mr. Weiss had the full authority to bring cases in other jurisdictions if he felt it was necessary. On June 7th, Mr. Weiss wrote to the Judiciary Committee stating he had been granted ultimate authority over the matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges. But by June 30th, he had changed his tune and said that his charging authority was geographically limited, and it would be up to the U.S. Attorney's Office and then you to determine whether he can partner on the case, and if not, he can request special attorney status from the AG pursuant to 28 U.S.C. 515, and he had been assured that if...
This little lie they've woven is really ridiculous. I promised him he would have authority, so he had the authority.
Let me ask you, is there some distinct legal authority known as special attorney status?
I'm sorry?
Is there some distinct legal authority known as special attorney status?
Yeah, Section 515 permits the Attorney General to sign an order to authorize a prosecutor to work in another district.
And if you had already decided that he had full authority, why did you feel it was necessary to sign that document?
I'm sorry?
Why did Mr. Weiss feel that he would need that extra authority if you had conveyed to him that he would have all that authority?
You'll have to speak with Mr. Weiss about that. I think his 3 letters are quite clear that he understood he would have the necessary authority and that no U.S. attorney could block him.
Okay. We asked you earlier about his request for this authority, and we need to know who he spoke to about this authority and when. Before he asked you in August, he had discussions about this with others at the department. Who did he discuss special counsel authority with, and when did he do that?
I'm not going to discuss internal deliberations of the department. I guaranteed that Mr. Weiss would have the authority that he needed, and the moment he asked for the authority, I gave it to him.
You know, this is bullshit. I gotta pause this for a second. They locked this thing up deliberately, people. Okay? He's like, oh, we already have the authority because I promised him authority. Oh, well, that clears up all the whole timeline shit. He was promised authority, so he had authority. But then, eventually, he gives him authority. And now, all we have is 3 letters from Mr. Weiss, who are not going to talk. All right? He's not going to come and talk about what else going on. Why? Well, he's going through an investigation now, and maybe in about 3 or 4 or 7 years, he'll come back with a report, and then you can ask him. Right? This is such blatant obfuscation, okay, and cover-up. I mean, it just stinks, reeks to shit, to high heaven of cover-up, okay? My God.
Did he discuss it with the Deputy Attorney General?
Again, I'm not going to get into discussions of deliberations within the Justice Department.
That is not a valid constitutional objection.
Well, that is a valid constitutional deliberation. It has to constitutional objection. It has to do with the ability of the Justice Department to do its communications, just as your deliberations with your staff and with other members are protected by the Constitution.
Detailing who had conversations and when does not implicate the internal deliberations at the department. The substance of those deliberations, simply detailing who and when, does not implicate those.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the internal discussions of the department or who talked to who about what. Mr. Weiss has told this committee that he well understood his ability to bring a case wherever he wanted.
Of course, you're not going to talk about it.
Do you think that the extraordinary circumstances that you cited in the appointment have anything to do with the June 22nd and July 19th testimony of whistleblowers, Special Agents Shapley and Ziegler?
I don't think it has anything to do with Mr. Shapley, no.
Gentleman,
I'll yield to the chairman.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. Mr. Garland, have you or are you investigating who leaked the information that appeared in the Washington Post on October 6, 2022 about this investigation, about the Hunter Biden investigation?
You're saying there was an October 2022...
October 6, 2022, Washington Post writes a story about the Hunter Biden investigation. I wonder, have you investigated who leaked that information to the Washington Post?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Has it been referred to the Inspector General? Do you know that?
I don't want my answer to suggest that there is or isn't such an investigation. I know that the Inspector General sent a letter to Congress explaining that he had an ongoing assessment with respect to the whistleblowers' charges. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Time the gentleman's expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Colorado.
I thank the chairman and the ranking member for holding this hearing. Thank you, Attorney General, for your testimony, for appearing before us, and for your service to our country. I have great respect for my colleague from Virginia on the other side of the aisle. I'm a bit confused as to why they have zeroed in or focused in on this particular letter in such a myopic way, but your testimony, and I wrote down words here, that the moment he, meaning the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, Mr. Weiss, asked for the authority, I gave it to him. Seems pretty straightforward. And as you said, the letters that Mr. Weiss has written to this committee are publicly available, and we encourage anybody who's watching these hearings to certainly review those. As you said, clearly they're consistent with each other in terms of reading those letters collectively. I think it's important, Mr. Attorney General, to perhaps talk a bit about your record and your background in light of...
Oh, yeah, let's talk about why you're such a great guy and your character is so awesome and why you should be believed and why the fact that you gave special counsel status to Weiss like within 24 hours to 48 hours after the whistleblower testimony. How conveniently you did that, right? And then now everything's back under investigation again. Yeah, I can't talk about it. But you know what we can talk about? Let's talk about your stellar service in convicting all those Trump people and all those indictments you brought against Trump. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
The various attacks, unfortunately, by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. My understanding is that you served as a special assistant to the Attorney General of the United States early on in your career. Is that right?
It's my first job out of being a law clerk. Yes.
Your first job out of law school. You later
being
were,
out of after law clerk.
After law clerking, of course. You later were in private practice.
Yes.
And you left private practice to become a line attorney at the Department of Justice.
That's right, to be an assistant U.S. attorney.
An assistant U.S. attorney, a federal prosecutor, taking on organized crime cases, drug trafficking cases, violent crimes.
Yes, I don't know about the organized crime, organized drug trafficking, yes.
Following that service, you served in the Department of Justice as the principal associate
Attorney General.
Attorney General.
Yeah. Deputy Attorney General, yes.
Deputy Attorney General. This is in the mid-90s.
That's right.
And in that capacity, you supervised a range of high-profile cases. Is that right?
Yes, they were high-profile cases.
The Unabomber case?
Why are we holding this guy's hand, this old man, and walking him through his own damn resume? Why are we doing that?
The Unabomber case.
The Unabomber case, yes.
The Atlanta Olympic bombing.
The Olympic bombing, yes.
You remember that one? Remember that one? Remember that one? Like, this guy's not quite Robert Mueller, but he's pretty bad.
The Oklahoma City bombing case.
Olympic, yes, that's
You
right.
received praise with respect to that latter investigation from the then Republican governor of the state of Oklahoma. Is that right?
Yes, who was a very good partner in the investigation.
And just because that you were a person that was good for a little while doesn't mean that all of a sudden, you still can't be bad regarding other things. This idea that, I've helped little old ladies across the street, and I've also done bad things, It's ridiculous.
With respect to Oklahoma.
You then were nominated and appointed to the federal bench, the U.S. District Court of Appeals here in Washington, D.C., correct?
For the U.S. Court of Appeals, yes.
Right. You were confirmed by a bipartisan majority. Over 20 Republican senators voted for your confirmation.
I'll take your word for it. I think that's correct.
You served on the bench for a significant period of time, ultimately becoming the chief judge.
Yes, that's right.
You left that position to return to the Department of Justice, where you had started your career.
Yes.
And you were confirmed into this position in which you now hold on a bipartisan basis in the Senate.
Yes.
I think it's unfortunate, Mr. Attorney General, that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have conflated questions about various cases that the department has brought with impugning your integrity. And I can assure you that the vast majority of the American people don't share their opinion, and that my constituents, the folks back in Colorado, are grateful for your lifetime of service that you have given to this country. And I recognize that this is, I suspect, a frustrating exercise in terms of this particular hearing, because I suspect that you'd like to be talking about the prevalence of fentanyl in our communities and the work that the Department of Justice is doing to interdict it, the gun violence epidemic in our country, and the work that the FBI and other law enforcement agencies are doing to stop it. And my hope is that the next oversight hearing, perhaps those can be the focus, the bulk of the hearing. I'd be remiss if I didn't say one note about a rule that the Department of Justice recently promulgated. As you may recall, in 2021, March of 2021, I sent a letter to the Department of Justice requesting that the Department of Justice issue a rule regulating stabilizing braces. One of these braces was used, as you might recall, at a mass shooting in my community in Boulder, Colorado, where 10 Coloradans tragically lost their lives, including one police officer. And the Department of Justice issued a final rule earlier this year on this precise topic. Unfortunately, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have made it their mission to overturn this rule. I wonder if you might be able to just elaborate a bit on how the rule was drafted and deliberated within the department.
Yes, well, that horrific event in Boulder was one of several examples of the use of attachment of a semi-automatic pistol to a stabilizing brace intended to permit its firing from the shoulder. That violates the rule, the congressional statute against short-barreled rifles being possessed without registration, anything under 16 inches. The reason for Congress's statute, which I think probably goes back to the Al Capone era, was the power of such a weapon and the ability to aim such a weapon when it's shouldered. All that was done in this rule was to make clear that if you convert a pistol into a rifle designed to be fired from the shoulder, you're subject to the registration requirement.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I yield back.
The Attorney General has requested a short break, so the committee will stand in recess for a few minutes, and then we'll be back for the remainder of our members' questions.
Yeah, we got dead air. We can't have dead air. In recess. Okay. I didn't even hear. I don't know if they went to lunch or what.
Yeah.
Then they probably went to lunch, yeah. 12 something right now, yeah. So 1 o'clock, yep. So yeah, that's crazy, man. Crazy tunes. This is what's going on right here. I mean, excuse me. It's just like any other hearing, right? Where, yeah, it's just like any hearing where, you know, we attempt to get to the truth, and the member of the DOJ or the FBI, whatever, it doesn't matter who's in the seat at any moment in time, will shroud everything in secrecy under the label of, well, it's an ongoing investigation and we just can't talk about that. Or they use the shield of, hey, totally independent. Apparently totally independent. You know what? I wish I had a job one day where I had a boss and the boss looked at me and said, oh, hey, the guy is totally independent. I told him he's got the authority to do whatever the fuck he wants in our company. What kind of bullshit is that? What kind of bullshit lie is that? Right? You're either totally fucking incompetent, right? Or you're deliberately feigning any involvement because you don't want your hands to be dirty, right? You're doing the Pontius Pilate, right? You're crucifying, right? But then, because he's now special counsel, he's got special counsel status. Who's going to fire that fucker? Right? And nobody. Who's going to talk to him? No, he's going to go underground like a mole. Right? This shit is all designed to just keep everybody in the dark, especially the oversight committee. Right? And as far as I'm concerned, the only way to fix this shit is to pull the fucking plug on it. Pull the funding. Do it. Pull the funding. See what happens if crime runs rampant more than it did before without the fucking FBI. Probably not. Because all they're doing is doing political shit. They're all busy doing political shit. And everybody else can take a break for a couple of weeks. I'm sure the local cops can handle it. Right? Come on, man.
You got a live stream, right side broadcasting. Is that a rally?
Is that a rally? All right. Well, let me put up stream. Let me put up a second stream while I'm talking. Yeah. So, yeah. Let me just open that up, and I'll put up over the hurricane cam, which we don't have a hurricane anymore. So, yeah, it's crazy, man. I just get so tired of it. You know, the hearings always go like that, right? And there's nobody ever takes responsibility, culpability. You know, I've never seen. Have you ever worked in a private corporation where people can just go, you know, to the shareholders, that people can just go, well, you know, I mean, I don't know what the fucking people under me, you know how many people work for me? I can't pay attention to everything. Shit, that's unreasonable. Right? How long would you fucking have your job? Like 0 minutes, seconds. But somehow in government, you can just do that. You can be totally, freaking, completely, and utterly incompetent. And that's just okay because, I don't know, we're supposed to just, like, we're supposed to just get in the car, right, and just not drive, steer, nothing. We just put our foot right on the gas, and the hell with what's going on, you know. Nobody runs a business that way, but yet we run government that way. And the gaslighting is so thick that that's just supposed to be the way it is. Not to mention that this delusion, okay, that the DOJ and the FBI are independent branches of government. They're not. Take a civics class, dude. Right? They're not. What are they? They're under the executive branch. But that doesn't mean that the Congress, the oversight, they have congressional oversight is directly enumerated in the Constitution, right? So this idea that you know, Congress doesn't have any business getting in their business is a bunch of shit, right? It just is. And I don't buy it. I don't buy it for one damn second. But they do this shit all the time, and they play with words. Okay, oh my God, the Democrats play with words and adjectives, and what was it? The Democrats went through. It was great. If you weren't here before, asked Merrick Garland because they want to dispel this idea that there were agents. FBI agents in the crowd at January 6th, right? And so they said, was this person, Joe Biggs, an FBI agent? Was Enrico Terrio an FBI agent? No, they weren't FBI agents. They were informants. They were assets, right? Paid assets. Okay? But they didn't ask him that. They asked him if they're agents, and he said boldly no. See, they do this shit all the time, and nobody called him on it. Nobody fucking called him on it. And this is just, it's honest to God. It's just, it's sad. It's pathetic. I don't know, man. These people just constantly playing games, right? And if you're not paying attention, right, you don't notice it. But, I mean, at this point, I think it's so silly, the arguments, and there's so much evidence in plain sight that at this point, I think even the general public, I think even CNN can't snow anybody anymore. Not like that. And I see pockets of people waking up, right? So, yeah, man. Yep. It's crazy. Yeah, it's garbage, all of it. And it always is. You know, Jennifer was all excited last night about 10 o'clock tomorrow, Merrick Garland's going to get on there. And I saw somebody else's tweet, you know, that said pretty much how it's going to go. And it's exactly how it went, right? Just like every other damn hearing. Just like when Christopher Wray gets up there, and you just wait for these, ooh, gotcha, Perry Mason moments, right? And you just wait for it to happen, and it never does. But at least you see the patheticness on display, and you force them even further down the line, down the path of ignoring the pink elephant in the middle of the room. And you can keep calling attention, and the pink elephant keeps growing until more and more and more people start to realize, yeah, there's something going on here, right? And so it's working. It just seems and feels as if, oh my God, it's just like we're never going to be able to get it done. And we may not, politically speaking. I just don't know. I don't know that there's enough people that we're going to be able to vote our way out of this, honestly. I made a tweet about that. And most popular tweet I've ever done, a comment on somebody else's tweet about something that the one world government, man, is going on, and in this new funding in this package, and we're all just basically screwed. And I'm like, all of our organizations, all of our institutions, everything is so damn corrupt. We're a generation away from getting this shit back, right? And we're just not going to be able to vote this crap away. And all of this, and you guys are right over there at Mailman Farms. This is a bunch of drivel. It's a bunch of crap. It's kabuki theater. But unfortunately, right now, it's not the only damn thing we can do, but it's part of something we can do. But the next thing they need to do is just not fund this shit. Okay? Just shut it down. Just shut it down. And this idea that, oh my God, what would happen if the FBI took a break for a minute? Oh, I don't know. Like maybe I would be not afraid. I was afraid of going to jail someday for at least a couple of weeks. Because I thought about going to January 6th. If you know what I'm saying. Not saying I was there or nothing. No, no. Yeah, anyway. So, this is all a bunch of crap, and this is all staging, and every Democrat has their, I could just hear the meeting where they always said, okay, so you diversity hire Hispanic lady, you're going to just go on for your 5 minutes about how wonderful they are about this, and lady, you're going to talk about how he's upheld the abortion rights, and you're going to spend your old minutes, you got to be the one that talks about Trump, I'm sorry, but you got to do that. And then you're going to do a presentation on January 6th, Mr. Lou. That's what you're going to do. That's your job, right? And they set up this whole kabuki theater bullshit, right? And our side, at least tries and swings and gets in there. Some are better than others, man. Jim Jordan, he's a monster, right? He just goes in his swinging, man, and break a few rules. That's just great. We need a little less decorum, in my opinion. And shit, since Fetterman's allowed to run around like he just came from a pickleball tournament, right? In his fucking flip-flops going down the halls of Congress, flip-flop, 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 right? What the hell? What's decorum anyway? Screw it, right? So anyway, I'm gonna give my vocal cords a break, and I'm gonna put this this rally on here, what's going on, and I'm gonna go do something and probably do a little work so that my wife don't kill me while I got an opportunity. So nice to have you hanging out with us, anybody who is. I'll be back.
You doing the swap window?
Yeah, I'm on.
And by the way, what is this pronoun stuff? They, them, their? I don't even know what this means. We shouldn't even have to say this, but you will be called two things by me. You have two options, sir or ma'am, period. The main reason that we're here today is to get ready. Are we here in Iowa going to be the first state to send President Trump the nomination to go back to the White House? I'd like a show of hands. There's nothing wrong with this. Raise your hand if you've never caucused before and are planning on this being your first caucus. This is a movement. Keep your hands up, please. This is a movement. Look at all of the new folks that President Trump is bringing in here. This is wonderful. Give them a round of applause. We all in this room have a unique opportunity to help deliver Iowa to President Trump. You can text that number. You can go to iowa-donaldjtrump.com. You can find out how to be engaged. You can find out how to volunteer at events. There's a lot of perks that come along with that. So I would highly encourage that. And as far as the caucuses are concerned, the biggest thing I want to leave you today is it's not an intimidating process. For those that have not done it before, you show up on January 15th. The Republican Party of Iowa, as well as our website, will give you your specific precinct location. You show up, you vote for Donald Trump, you go home, and we win. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce one of your own. I have had the pleasure of getting to know Steve Bradley after you sent him, which, by the way, thank you for sending him to the State House and kicking Andy McKean down the road. Steve has very quickly not only become a good friend, but has become one of the most valuable legislators in the entire legislature. So thank you for that. So with no further ado, Representative Steve Bradley.
Thank you, Representative Kaufman. Sir, is this heaven, or is this Iowa, or is this Jackson County? First of all, I want to give due to who needs us. I would like every veteran to stand. Thank you for your service. We are forever grateful. I want to tell you why I ran, and Bobby hit on it. When President Trump won, who was the best president we've had, we had a gentleman who was a Republican and switched to become a Democrat because he didn't like President Trump. Boo-hoo you. My wife and I ran our tails off. We campaigned and campaigned, and we beat a 40-year politician. I want to reiterate to everybody to go to our caucuses and put Trump's name down. That's what we need to do here. We need Trump to get in office again. We need a businessman. We need somebody to represent us. You know, some people say, well, I don't like what he says. You know, most of the time he's saying what I'm thinking. So I can't thank you enough for all being here and for electing me too. I appreciate that. Our next speaker is Representative Luana Stoltenberg. Now, I will tell you, Luana had a hard time getting elected. She ran her tail off just like we did the first time and the second time. She is the most pro-life representative we have in the State House. And without further ado, Luana.
I'm okay. I actually thought I was going to do that when I was walking up here, and I was making a mental note not to. Anyway, good afternoon, everyone, all of you fellow patriots. It's great to see you. Are you guys all excited to see President Trump? I cannot wait to see him. I cannot. Like Steve said, my name is Luana Stoltenberg, and I'm a representative in the Iowa House. I'm a freshman. This is my first time. I ran in a very, very blue district and won by only 11 votes. Amazing, isn't it? We worked hard. But I tell you that because that's how important every single vote is. Sometimes you guys might think, oh, I'm not going to go to caucus. It's just one vote. We need every single one of you guys' vote. So please show up on January 15th at 7 p.m. because every vote is so important. Our Iowa motto is, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. Do you guys know anyone who is working as hard as President Trump to protect our rights and our freedoms? Even as he's being persecuted and being indicted for it, there's no one that's fighting as hard as he is. Donald Trump is the president who has kept us out of wars. Look at the lives that have been lost and the money that we have spent in Ukraine by this administration. And let's not forget the military withdrawal that we saw in Afghanistan. Look at the equipment and all of the innocent lives that were left behind. Not to even mention the piles of cash that we left for our enemies. This administration would not have done that. A few other legislators and myself went to the border in June, and what we saw was an absolute mess. The Border Patrol told us that we could not sustain the amount of illegals that are coming across our borders right now. They told us that Trump's border policies were discouraging illegal immigrants, were discouraging trafficking and illegal drugs, and that the wall was working. But this administration is paying people not to put up the wall, and in fact, they're taking it down in places. We cannot have this anymore. This commander-in-chief has got to go. Yes. You know, the Biden administration is the most pro-death regime we have ever seen. They are making abortion legal, even all the way up to birth in some states. President Trump has been a pro-life champion. He even nominated many of those in the Supreme Court that overturned Roe this last couple years. Do you know that this administration is giving Planned Parenthood well over $600 million of your tax dollars every year? That's $1.5 million a day. Wouldn't you like that for your business or maybe your household? Well, Donald Trump is pro-life, and he is not going to do that for Planned Parenthood. This president has fought for our Constitution. He's fought for our freedoms and our rights. And so we need, let's talk about the economy. How many of you guys are feeling it at the grocery store? How much is it costing you to fill up your gas tanks these days? Things were a little bit different a few years ago, weren't they? Yeah, we need it back. Look at the mess this administration has created in less than 3 years. Something's got to go. It's got to change. So we've got to vote President Trump back into office. So I'm asking you today, will you promise to be a part of this caucus plan on January 15th at 7 p.m.? Will you go? Yes. It's like Bobby said, it is so easy. All you have to do is go to this meeting. It maybe will take an hour. They'll talk about some business stuff, and then you just vote. It's just a little bit more intimate than going to the polls. In fact, you might get to meet your neighbors. So I'm just asking, let's do this. President Trump has worked so hard for us. Let's work hard for him, and that's not even hardly working hard, right? You know, President Trump always says, let's make America great again. I say let's all vote in this caucus and let's all make America great again, okay? Thank you. Now I would like to introduce a congressman His name is Wesley Hunt, to come up to the podium.
President Roosevelt famously said, "It is not the critic that counts, nor the man points out how the strong man stumbles, nor how the doer of deeds could have done them better. But the credit belongs to the man who was actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who actually strives to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms and the great devotions, who spends himself in a
Committee will come to order. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Arizona for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The triumph of my
Sir,
achievement,
is it the
and
policy of your office for U.S. attorneys to
even
use
if he fails,
prosecutorial quotas?
at least fails while
I'm sorry, I'm having a little difficulty hearing.
Okay, I'll get right on top of this thing. Is it the policy of your office for U.S. attorneys to use prosecutorial quotas?
To prosecute?
Yeah, do you have any prosecutorial quotas?
in the arena, and I am surrounded
So
by
that'd be anathema to your office then, right? I mean, it's not a policy. So would you
we,
be...
We don't, correct, we do not have quotas.
Right. And so would it be consistent with that when you have a prosecutor said that they're going to he wants to prosecute at least 2,000 people who are alleged to have committed a certain type of crime?
So look, I think you're referring to the January 6th question.
I'm just asking you, would that be consistent with your office's policy if somebody said we're going to get up to 2,000 people on a particular crime? Is that consistent with your policy?
I think what that U.S. Attorney was referring to was a prediction for how many more cases would still be brought because the court had asked how many more people have
You filed a letter with the court saying that we're looking at upwards of 2,000. We've got 1,200 more that we think we're going to get. So you don't do that for anything else, right? So you don't have anything like tax fraud. You're not saying, okay, we're going to have so many people that we want to get for tax fraud, so many people we want to get for lying on federal firearms applications.
If a court asks us what the likely workload will be based on prosecutions and investigations that are pending, the U.S. Attorney is obligated to respond.
Did you guys provide any reference of the number of people you thought you would prosecute who were involved in the 2020 summer riots of the burning of the Portland courthouse while there were still people inside those courthouses? You didn't ever file with the court or anything, say, oh, we think we're going to have another 300, 400, whatever it may be, because you didn't file those charges, did you?
I'm sorry, I'm not following. I believe that
I'm sure you're not.
The number that you're asking about was...
Let me ask you this question.
...objection that the court had asked the U.S. Attorney to make.
Let's switch topics. Maybe this one would be easier to follow, I suppose. Is it the policy of the DOJ to provide advance notice to subjects before conducting a search for evidence?
It totally depends on the circumstance.
If the circumstance were that you had a guest house where the U.S. Attorney, Deputy U.S. Attorney saying, well, we know that we suspect there's a lot of evidence there, but we're not gonna really follow that up. And calls the attorney from the other side saying, we were going to do a search warrant. Would that be consistent with your policy?
Okay, again, I know this is no hypothetical, and I don't know the facts of this case, and I don't know what happened, and I believe the events you're talking about, as reported in the press, occurred under the previous administration. So
no, that event didn't happen under the previous administration. Let's talk about that. I mean, you keep saying this happened under the previous administration. But let's talk about this for just a moment. You keep saying, I don't know what happened there, but I'm going to opine when it happened. Do you see the fallacy of that, the inconsistencies? I don't know when it happened. I don't know what happened because I'm not involved, but it happened under the previous administration. That's so logically fallacious.
I'm sorry, I'm not following what's
I know you're not following. So the question is,
not following.
You've got one of your deputy U.S. attorneys calling the attorney on this side saying, look, we're going to go to these two places, probably go in the next couple of days. And of course, then ultimately the search warrant is called off. I just want to know, is it consistent to call up people where you know that they've got boxes of information, or you suspect they have boxes of information? That's why you got the warrant. That's why you're going to go look.
It's not.
And you give them a heads up so they can move those boxes of information. Would that be consistent with DOJ policy?
I'm just going to say again, you're asking me actually to comment about allegations in a particular case about which
No, I'm not. I'm
context.
asking you, is that consistent with your overall policy? Forget Delaware and what they did and that they actually did that. Let's just talk about generic policy.
I'm sorry, I thought you were asking about Mar-a-Lago. I may not have understood then. I'm sorry.
Yeah, la-di-da.
So
when we're talking about this, when we're talking about your general policy, is it your policy? Is that acceptable when you suspect that there are movable items to call up and say we're gonna be there to look?
Yeah, there's no policy on this question. The strategy and tactics to be used to preserve evidence are left up to the investigators and offices on the ground. Sometimes it would be a serious mistake to call up. Sometimes it would not.
Here once again, you don't know what happened in the Hunter Biden case because that's somebody else is doing it. But you can be sure of the timing of when all this took place. That is one of the biggest oddities of your testimony today. I yield back to the gentleman from Colorado.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Thank you for your decades of faithful service to our country, to our Constitution, and to the rule of law.
Yeah, here comes the
Thank
smoke.
you for putting up with this today.
God, you're beautiful.
The
You're
American people
super
are
and
watching.
awesome guy.
They know what's going on
Yeah.
here. This is a gross misuse of your time, your team's time, and our time.
This is a waste of our
shameful
time,
circus.
lady.
It has a goal. The goal is to spew lies and disinformation, ultimately to tear away at the confidence of our independent institutions, in your case today, our very important Department of Justice. That's the exact MO of a former president. Tear away at the confidence of our independent institutions, whether it's our electoral system, the Department of Justice, the judiciary, and independent news media. The American people are watching this sham. But it's not just a circus, it's dangerous, and you know that, and you have mentioned that. I believe that these fictions and fantasies are dangerous. Dangerous for you and the 115,000 public servants with whom you work. Dangerous for national security. Dangerous for communities' security. Dangerous for the rule of law and our Constitution. All at the same time of a looming shutdown. The other side of the aisle cannot govern. And so they have this hearing, which was supposed to be oversight, and use it as a big distraction because they are failing to govern. Imagine if we go into a shutdown. What does that say to your members of your department? What does it say to our service members, U.S. troops who would be training, fighting without pay and without confidence in this country's governing ability? It's a great distraction. So let me pivot to something I care about, and I know you and your department cares about. It is Recovery Month. And for families like mine with a member in recovery, every month is Recovery Month. So I thank you for what you are doing on the fentanyl crisis, the overdose crisis that has claimed 110,000 lives in a single 12-month period. 300 souls a day, every day. Souls who have died while we were in this hearing, every day. What is the department doing to combat the trafficking, to combat the amount of fentanyl on the ground? As DEA has said, there's enough fentanyl on the ground right now to kill this entire population multiple times over. Tell us about your important work in fentanyl.
Well, Congresswoman, let me begin by saying I share your personal concern and grief over this. I have met with the families of children, of teenagers, of elderly people who have become addicted to fentanyl and who have died from fentanyl. Everything you're saying is correct, and it's a catastrophe for the country. So as a consequence, the Justice Department has poured its resources, particularly from DEA, with FBI assistance as well, and with fugitive arrests by the Marshal Service and with gun tracing by the ATF, into the entire process by which fentanyl reaches the United States. So we have sanctioned the precursor companies in China. We have indicted some of them for their violations. We have arrested some as far off as in Fiji and brought them back to the United States. We have traced these precursors to Mexico, where they are made into the fentanyl pills. Fentanyl costs about 10 cents to make. It can be sold on the street in the United States between $10 and $30. You can see what the enormous profit motive is here. So we must stop the cartels themselves. I have, as I said, traveled to Mexico twice in order to work with our counterparts in the military and law enforcement there.
I thank you for all of that. I want to just pivot once, and I want to do anything I can to partner with you on this issue so that we stop losing people. I traveled recently with the Foreign Affairs Committee to The Hague, met with the extraordinary folks, the top prosecutor and his able team. They were very complimentary of the Department of Justice and your work. Can you tell us about your important role, or America's important role, in war crimes, especially in light of your powerful history?
Yes, I'm happy to. So I've traveled to Ukraine twice and to meet with the Prosecutor General there. And I'm going to meet with him again this week here, and he has met with me several times here. The Justice Department is pursuing the war crimes from Russia's unlawful and unjust invasion of Ukraine to help to investigate war crimes over which we have jurisdiction, to help the Prosecutor General in Ukraine investigate those prosecutions. I was, I believe, the first cabinet member ever to visit The Hague, the International Criminal Court of Justice, and to meet with Karim Khan, who is the chief prosecutor, to talk about our cooperation in respect to the investigations that they are doing. I've assigned a Justice Department prosecutor to the investigatory body that's been set up in The Hague for the crime of aggression. And she is there now working with the ICC and with Europol and Eurojust. And I've assigned a prosecutor to our embassy in Kyiv to work with our ambassador there and to work with the Prosecutor General's office there.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing that answer to go on, because it is critically important. America is indispensable, and your work is indispensable. Thank you, sir.
Time of the gentle has expired. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Attorney General, do you support the consent decree that I believe was put in place in the city of Minneapolis?
I'm sorry, do I support the?
Do you support the consent decree that was put in place with the police department of Minneapolis?
One was put in place by the federal government, yes.
Yes. Do you support fewer cops on the street?
Do I support?
Fewer cops on the street?
No, I don't support fewer cops on the streets.
That's what's happening as a result of what's happening.
I don't think that's a consequence of the consent decree.
Do you support?
Minneapolis has been losing police officers for many years.
Do you support more crime?
Do I support more crime?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
So there was just a hearing in Minnetonka, Minnesota, a tiny suburb of Minneapolis, just I think this last week, where they're beside themselves with the amount of crime that continues in Minneapolis since the riots of 2020. And I would point out to you that I had an officer in my district. I lived right across the border in Wisconsin, or that's where my district begins. A police officer was shot to death as a result of a weak on crime prosecutor in St. Paul and Minneapolis, Minnesota. Guy served only 4 years for a violent crime. Do you think that that's a problem?
An officer was shot to death. That is certainly not an appropriate sentence. That's outrageous. Let me be clear, we are doing everything we can to assist Minneapolis. We have a very aggressive U.S. attorney who's brought a number of RICO and Vicar cases.
Let me continue. I got a real short period of time here.
Sorry.
In regards to disrupting drug networks, why do you think there's so much fentanyl coming into the country?
because it costs 10 cents to make and it can be sold for $30.
So Sheriff Mark Daniels from Cochise County, Arizona, sat right where you were at a few months ago, and under oath he said, the reason there is such a drastic increase in fentanyl coming into the country is because on January 20th of 2021, open borders policies were announced by President Biden. Have you expressed concern about those open borders policies that have led to this rapid increase in the amount of fentanyl coming into our country?
I can't associate myself with the conclusion reached by the sheriff, although I can certainly commiserate with the concerns.
So the sheriff is incorrect.
Look, the cartels in Mexico are bringing this, are causing this drug to be transmitted into the United States, and we were doing everything we can to eliminate that incentive.
Yeah, you're not going to do it on doing that. Mr. Chairman, just so we're real clear here, this is the same answer we received from Secretary Mayorkas a couple months ago when he was in denial about a sheriff who lives, one of the most reputable sheriffs you'll find in the United States of America, sitting down there on that southern border. He sees it every day. He saw it working in 2020 because he told me when I was down there. And now he says it is not working, and it started January 20th of 2021. You can pretend that you're dealing with fentanyl. You're not, because the borders are wide open. Do you believe, I'm going to shift to combating gun violence. Do you believe that a prohibited person that acquires a gun illegally and disposes it in a dumpster where a criminal or an innocent child could gain access to it should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law?
This is no longer a hypothetical question. You're referring to a specific case which is now in judicial determination before a court of law. It's not appropriate for me to comment on that case.
So for the record, Mr. Chairman, let's understand that the same prosecuting attorney who is now the special counsel gave a sweetheart deal to that person. And yes, you are correct. We're referring to the president's son. He got a sweetheart deal, and the judge was smart enough to smell a rat when she saw it, and she said, you guys go back to the drawing board. That same special counsel is in charge of this investigation. Isn't that correct, Mr. Chairman? Absolutely. I want to close real quickly with this. There was a World Naked Bike Ride in Madison, Wisconsin, just a couple months ago, and I sent you a letter 2 months ago asking if you had a problem with that because it exposed a 10-year-old girl by the race organizer, the bike organizers, to pedaling around Madison, Wisconsin naked. Do you think that's a problem? And why did you not answer our letter from 2 months ago?
I'm sorry, I'll have to ask the Office of Legislative Affairs to get back to you about this.
Does it typically take 2 months to be able to answer questions like this?
No, it sounds like you're asking about a question about state and local law enforcement. We get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters. I'll ask the Office of Legislative Affairs where that letter is.
State and local law enforcement would not act. We were hoping you would. It's obvious you're not. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Mr. Attorney General, for joining us and for your patience with this questioning. I'm honored to represent a diverse community in North Carolina. Wake County has worked to welcome people of all backgrounds, ethnicities, and religions. The growth and success of my district in the Research Triangle Park depends on our commitment to celebrating the many cultures that contribute to our community. Unfortunately, over the past few years, these very communities that have contributed so much to my state and my district have found themselves under attack. Jewish.
Who is this pasty white woman lecturing all of us about racism? God, women should not be in government.
State have locked down in response to bomb threats. Asian Americans in North Carolina and throughout the country have found themselves facing slurs and threats spurred in large part by the racialized language about the COVID-19 pandemic. The Southern Poverty Law Center reported in late 2020 that the number of white nationalist groups grew 55% between 2017 and 2019, noting that the rise in hate-based attacks coincides with the growth of the white nationalist movement. And the Anti-Defamation League relatedly found that white supremacist propaganda incidents occurred over 14 times per day on average in 2020, with a total of 5,125 reported cases, nearly twice the number of cases reported in 2019, and the highest number the ADL has ever recorded. This dangerous trend has continued in the last few years and has recently included, as active clubs have been increasing in their number and prominence. These active clubs started popping up in late 2020 and are a network of white nationalist groups that see themselves as fighters in training for an ongoing war against a system they claim is deliberately plotting against the white race. As Attorney General, I am deeply interested and concerned about the rise of these clubs, threats of violence, and actual violence, and wanted to know if you're familiar with these activities and what your department is doing to counteract them.
So I'm not familiar with the specifics of those clubs, and I will certainly look into what the department's doing in that respect. Very soon after I came into the department, I saw the spike in hate crime threats that were being made and in actual acts of violence. I directed the department to develop a strategy for responding to that. 30 days later, that was pretty much coincident with Congress's passage of the COVID No Hate Act. And we have now fulfilled, I think, all of the obligations under that act. We have task forces set up to investigate and prosecute hate crimes, both as hate crimes and where they satisfy the requirements as domestic violent extremism or as domestic terrorism. We have brought dozens of cases against people who have made these threats, as well as, in particular, those who have attempted to carry them out. And as you know, we have a prosecution pending in Buffalo with respect to the horrendous killing of Black Americans in the Tops grocery store by an avowed white supremacist.
I just got to say something about this. Oh my God. This lady, let's talk about the white supremacy that's growing lady, okay? Tee this shit right up, right? So we can talk about the rise of the spooky white nationalists, okay? How about white people that believe that we should have a fucking border? Because you can't be a nation without a border. And that maybe we just try to preserve our culture just a little bit and not pour tons of people that are different cultures, races, ethnicities, but not so much that, ideologies, right, into your damn country. And then sooner or later, people start getting, freaked out. And then you go, xenophobe, you're a white nationalist. You need to be arrested and be placed in re-education. Fuck. Oh, it's coming, people. It is coming. Mark my words.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your efforts in this regard. On a different subject with my last 45 seconds, North Carolina also saw the impact of cyber crimes with the Colonial Pipeline. Yes. And I'd like to know how your office is counteracting any cyber attacks and dealing with people who perpetrate them.
Yeah, so we are vigilant to the risk of these kind of cyber attacks. In that case, these were criminal gangs affiliated in Russia, resident in Russia. Fortunately, we had available intelligence from Section 702, which we were discussing a little bit earlier today, I have to say that's one of the principal sources of our ability to fight these kind of cyber attacks, whether they are criminal or whether they are launched by nation states, whether they are attempting to get ransomware and create ransom, whether they're simply trying, or also simply trying to exfiltrate our information, or whether they're trying to prevent our computers from working at all. The Justice Department has established a cyber task force for this purpose, a ransomware task force, and we are recently working on cryptocurrency in exactly the same way.
Time of the gentlelady has expired. We're going to try to move quickly.
Thank you. I yield back.
Attorney General, because we got votes and then we got a majority conference. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Attorney General, welcome. And my friend and colleague from Colorado outlined your biography, I thought, very well. But he left out 2 points that I'd like to mention. One is, not only did you lead the prosecution of the Oklahoma City bombing case, but in that case, the death penalty was asked for and actually received, and Timothy McVeigh was executed. Not exactly a Democrat priority to seek the death penalty in cases, but you did so because of the rule of law. You did so because the facts and the law demanded that you did so, and you followed the facts and the law in that situation. The other issue I wanted, or example in your bio that I wanted to point out, is my understanding that in your conference room, you have a portrait of Elliot Richardson. And the reason you have a portrait of Elliot Richardson is because he demanded that the Department of Justice stay independent from the Nixon administration. He had the backbone to stand up to the President of the United States and make sure that the Department of Justice would not become the government's lawyer. You put that portrait there soon after you became Attorney General because it was a signal. It was a signal to the world that you wanted to be known in the same way that others that had come before you were known. And frankly, one of the reasons I respect Attorney General Barr so much is because after January 6th, he made the very difficult decision to walk into the president's office and tell the president the election was not stolen. We have looked at this. And for that reason, he resigned before January 20th when power was turned over. But Mr. Attorney General, you're unable to answer some questions here, but I'll answer them for you. Do you know what people would have said if you had asked for U.S. Attorney Weiss's resignation when you became Attorney General? I'm sorry, U.S. Attorney. Yeah, U.S. Attorney Weiss's resignation. They would have said that you were obstructing the Hunter Biden investigation, that you were firing a Republican appointee so that you could appoint a Democrat to slow walk this investigation and lose the leadership of that investigation. If you had made the same decision a year later because you were frustrated that the prosecution wasn't moving fast enough, they would have again said that you were interfering with the prosecution. If you, when U.S. Attorney Weiss asked to become special counsel, if you had made the decision then to appoint someone else to special counsel, people would have criticized you because you would have been taking someone out of the investigation that knew the facts, that could lead the investigation, and put someone in who would have had to come up to speed on the investigation and wouldn't have allowed major decisions to be made until they came up to speed. So in 3 different opportunities where you could have acted, you would have been criticized either way, whether you acted or did not act in that situation. Far from slow walking, really, once the Trump administration decided that that was the person leading the investigation, your hands were tied. You didn't have the opportunity to make a decision on the leadership of that investigation. But speaking of slow walking, I appreciate your reference in your opening remarks, your written opening remarks, to the Department of Justice strongly supports efforts by Congress to promote competition in digital markets by passing legislation to prohibit certain anti-competitive practices by dominant online platforms. You can't say who they are, but I can. Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google are monopolies, and they have been harming this country and harming competition in that particular market for years. And Congress for 5 years has been investigating and offering bills on that subject. They spent $250 million, according to reports, in the last Congress to defeat those bills. And now we do nothing in this Congress to try to deal with that very serious issue. In fact, there are efforts, I'm told, over in the Senate, and I use the word effort and Senate very carefully in the same sentence, but there are efforts in the Senate, S 2321, to take $50 million in funding for the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, and it would be an 18% cut, and to move that money to the General Department of Justice Operations Fund to try to further cripple the efforts that are going on in court. The state attorney generals and the Antitrust Division and Federal Trade Commission are doing a great job jointly in trying to combat the scourge of these monopolies. My question to you is, will you make sure that the Antitrust Division is properly funded so it can continue this very serious effort at stopping these monopolies from harming our children, from harming competition, and from further strengthening China's position in this area?
Yes, I absolutely will. And one of the first things I did in the first budget opportunity we had was to ask for more money for the Antitrust Division than had been given in quite a long time, and to ask for the fees that are paid for purposes of merger analysis be given to the Antitrust Division directly rather than to go into a general fund.
Thank you. I yield back.
I would just point out for the record that Attorney General Barr left the Trump administration on December 23rd, 2020, not between January 6th and January 20th, 2021. With that, I recognize the gentlelady.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, since he mentioned monopoly, could I also enter into the record this article about the MasterCard Visa duopoly by Proactive and their target of a bipartisan bill to reform this monopoly? Could I insert that into the record, please?
Yeah, without objection, unanimous consent accepted. Gentlelady from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, Attorney General Garland. St. Louis and I are here today to make clear what it means to promote equal justice for every person in this country. Attorney General Garland, you often speak about your commitment to supporting civil rights and the rule of law. But I have concerns about whether the department under your leadership is doing the absolute most it possibly can to advance these goals. In the limited time I have, I want to share my concerns about specific issues with you directly and to make clear the steps that I believe that the department needs to take. First off, as this hearing has shown, a small number of the department's cases get an outsized level of attention in politics. But the reality is you preside over most of the federal system of mass incarceration. And every day in courtrooms around the country, including St. Louis, prosecutors who ultimately report to you are continuing to disproportionately prosecute disproportionately Black and brown people for disproportionately low-level immigration and narcotics and firearm offenses. And under your watch, the federal incarceration rate has increased for the first time in nearly a decade. Meanwhile, corporate crime enforcement is lower than it was during the Trump administration. The department needs to rethink its entire approach to prosecution, but let me also say I thank you for what you're doing with the insurrectionists. And I urge you to take specific steps towards ending mandatory minimums and prosecutory misconduct waivers and actively supporting alternatives to incarceration, funding federal public defenders, use of clemency power, and reporting on disparities in federal prosecutions. I'm also deeply concerned about the Bureau of Prisons. Director Peters is not doing enough to address the rampant issues of abuse and mismanagement at the Bureau, which affects both correctional staff and people in custody. It is shameful that solitary confinement has increased in the Bureau of Prisons during the Biden administration, despite the president claiming he supports ending it. We need to see more from the department across the board on Bureau of Prisons oversight. And you should implement the president's commitment to end the torturous practice of solitary confinement once and for all. I'm also incredibly disheartened that the department has continued to pursue the death penalty despite the president's pledge to end it. I urge the department to reverse course, including by dismantling the federal death chamber in Indiana and advocating for the commutation of the sentences of everyone on federal death row. I'm also still waiting to see any meaningful progress on the commitments that Associate Attorney General Gupta announced in June 22 around the enforcement of Title VI and the Safe Streets Act. I'd also like to, and I'm going on and on, but I'm taking my time. I also like an update on when the department will respond to the Oversight Committee Democrats' letter from June 2021 about the memo issued by the Trump administration's Office of Legal Counsel concerning the Equal Rights Amendment. That deeply flawed memo is preventing the Archivist of the United States from publishing the Equal Rights Amendment as the 28th Amendment. I know that OLC issued a short clarification after you took office, but the wording was not a clear repudiation of the Trump-era memo. I urge you to fully withdraw the Trump OLC memo, which is baselessly obstructing constitutional gender equality for all. Finally, I cannot overstate how shocked I am by the targeting of protesters who oppose the construction of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, or Cop City, and I urge the department to investigate these obvious violations of civil rights. These may all seem like unrelated issues, but to me, to my constituents, to countless advocates, and to people who are most directly impacted, they are interconnected, and they all speak to whether the department under your leadership will advance justice or simply pay lip service to it. Given the limited time that we have, I don't expect you to comment on all of these issues, but I have a question. Will you commit to working with me in my office on these issues, including having your staff promptly, by writing your position and sending that to us, reaching out to us about all of the issues that we just spoke about?
I'd be happy to have the Office of Legislative Affairs work with your staff. I want to say I could not be prouder of the civil rights record of this department. It is the fundamental basis for why the Justice Department was founded. We have a history of also being obviously involved in the 1960s. When I came to the Justice Department.
I'm going to stop you. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I just want you to understand where I'm coming from, the things that I would like to see. I don't mean to cut you off, but I need to reclaim my time. Finally, I want to remind everyone yet again that this is what good faith oversight looks like, not the Republican playbook of running interference for a twice impeached, 4 times indicted white supremacist demagogue who would rather overthrow our democracy than admit he lost an election. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank the chairman. Thank the Attorney General for being here before us today. On October 21st, 2021, before this committee, I asked you about Mr. Scott Smith, a father in Loudoun County, Virginia, who was arrested at a school board meeting where he questioned the rape of his daughter in a bathroom in the public school there. You said at the time you were unfamiliar